The weathered cuneiform tablets discovered in the ruins of Nippur between 1888 and 1900 contain some of the most enigmatic references to pre-human civilization ever found in Mesopotamian literature. Among the thousands of fragments catalogued by the University of Pennsylvania expeditions, a particular group of administrative texts stands out for their unusual content. Detailed rosters of 7 beings designated as Apkallu, literally meaning great water beings, who are credited with establishing the fundamental principles of human civilization during what scholars term the Ubaid period, roughly 5500 to 3800 BC. Unlike the gods who populate Sumerian religious mythology, these 7 figures are described in matter-of-fact administrative language more typical of personnel records than sacred texts, suggesting they were understood as actual historical entities rather than purely mythological constructs. What makes these tablets particularly compelling is their consistency across multiple independent sources spanning over 2 millennia. The Sumerian king list, composed around 2100 BC but drawing from much earlier records, names these same 7 Apkallu as advisors to the Antediluvian kings who ruled for impossibly long periods before the Great Flood. Babylonian sources from the 1st millennium BC preserve identical names and functions, while Assyrian ritual texts describe ongoing attempts to maintain contact with these departed sages through elaborate ceremonial procedures. The precision with which these accounts match across different periods, languages and political systems argues against dismissing them as religious invention or cultural mythology. Recent archaeological discoveries have begun to validate aspects of these ancient accounts in ways that challenge conventional understanding of Neolithic development. Excavations at sites predating the earliest Sumerian cities reveal technological sophistication and astronomical knowledge that appears fully formed rather than gradually developed, precisely matching the pattern these texts describe: advanced knowledge suddenly introduced by external instructors rather than slowly accumulated through human experimentation. The implications extend far beyond academic archaeology to fundamental questions about the origins of civilization itself. The systematic excavation of Nippur's temple precinct by the University of Pennsylvania between 1888 and 1900 uncovered over 30,000 cuneiform tablets spanning 2 millennia of Mesopotamian history. Among these administrative records, religious texts, and literary works, a distinct category emerged that catalogued what the ancient scribes termed the foundation knowledge brought by divine instructors. Tablet CBS 10,673, currently housed in the University Museum's collection, provides the most complete roster of 7 primary Apkallu, who served as advisors to Antediluvian kings and established the fundamental arts of civilization. The excavation of Nippur represented one of the earliest American archaeological expeditions to Mesopotamia and faced enormous logistical challenges in the harsh environment of central Iraq. The site, located approximately 160 kilometers southeast of modern Baghdad, had been abandoned for over 1,500 years when the University of Pennsylvania team began systematic exploration under the direction of John Punnett Peters. The expedition's primary objective focused on recovering cuneiform tablets that would illuminate Sumerian civilization, then barely understood by Western scholarship. What they discovered exceeded all expectations. The temple complex dedicated to Enlil, the chief deity of the Sumerian pantheon, yielded the largest single collection of cuneiform texts ever recovered from a single location. The tablets emerged from multiple levels of occupation, with the deepest strata containing the oldest and most enigmatic texts. Among these early documents, a surprising number dealt not with religious mythology, but with what appeared to be administrative records documenting the activities and teachings of specific named individuals designated as Apkallu. Unlike the gods who populated Sumerian religious literature, these Apkallu were described in concrete, historical terms using language more typical of personnel rosters than sacred narratives. Tablet CBS 10,673 provides the most systematic catalogue of these beings. Written in archaic Sumerian script that places its composition in the early dynastic period around 2600 BC, the tablet lists 7 names with accompanying descriptions of their specific domains of knowledge and areas of instruction. The precision with which these domains are delineated suggests functional administrative categories rather than symbolic religious classifications. Each Apkallu receives credit for introducing specific technologies and knowledge systems that formed the foundation of Mesopotamian civilization. The archaeological context of these tablets reveals careful preservation and copying activities that extended across centuries. The Nippur archive contains multiple copies of the Apkallu lists from different time periods, allowing scholars to trace how these traditions were maintained and transmitted through generations of scribal schools. The consistency of the information across these copies, despite being separated by centuries, argues strongly against gradual mythological elaboration. The core facts about the 7 Apkallu remained stable across vast spans of time. Hermann Vollrath Hilprecht, the Assyriologist who supervised much of the tablet cataloguing and initial translation work, noted in his published reports that the Apkallu texts stood apart from typical religious literature in their matter-of-fact tone and specific technical details. Unlike hymns to gods or mythological narratives, these documents read like institutional records documenting actual historical figures and their concrete achievements. Hilprecht initially struggled to reconcile this documentary style with the extraordinary claims the texts made about the Apkallu's capabilities and the time periods involved. Additional tablets from the Nippur collection describe the institutional frameworks through which the Apkallu operated. Text, CBS 15,892 details the establishment of what it terms the House of Wisdom at Eridu, where the Apkallu conducted their primary instruction activities. The tablet provides architectural specifications for this facility, including dimensions for teaching chambers, storage areas for instructional materials, and what appear to be astronomical observation platforms. The precision of these architectural descriptions suggests they documented actual buildings rather than mythological constructs. The temporal framework preserved in these texts places the Apkallu activities in the Antediluvian period, before the great flood that Mesopotamian tradition described as dividing human history into 2 distinct epochs. The Sumerian king list, also extensively preserved in the Nippur archive, explicitly associates the 7 Apkallu with the kings who ruled during this antediluvian period. These early rulers are credited with reigns lasting thousands or tens of thousands of years, chronologies that conventional scholarship dismisses as mythological exaggeration. However, the administrative precision with which these numbers are recorded and their consistent appearance across multiple independent sources suggests they may represent something more complex than simple fiction. The Nippur tablets preserve not only the names and functions of the Apkallu, but also details about their physical departure from human society following the flood. Several texts describe elaborate ceremonies conducted at major temple sites, where the Apkallu performed final rituals before withdrawing from direct involvement in human affairs. These departure accounts include specific details about the preparation of sacred spaces, the arrangement of knowledge repositories, and the establishment of communication protocols that would allow ongoing contact through human intermediaries. The technical specificity of these descriptions parallels the earlier accounts of Apkallu instruction, maintaining the same documentary tone that characterizes the entire corpus. The Sumerian administrative texts preserve remarkably consistent information about the individual Apkallu and their specific areas of expertise. Adapa, designated as he who completed the plans of heaven and earth, appears first in every known list and receives the most extensive documentation in Mesopotamian literature. His domain encompassed fundamental knowledge of cosmic order, astronomical calculation, and what the texts describe as the proper rituals for maintaining balance between celestial and terrestrial realms. The Adapa legend, preserved on tablets from both Babylonian and Assyrian sources, describes him as possessing such profound wisdom that he accidentally broke the south wind's wing. The Adapa narrative exists in multiple versions across different periods and locations, with fragments recovered from the library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh, from Amarna in Egypt, and from various Babylonian sites. This widespread distribution indicates the story's fundamental importance to Mesopotamian culture and suggests it preserved crucial information about the Apkallu and their capabilities. The tale describes how Adapa, while fishing in the Persian Gulf to provide offerings for the temple of Ea at Eridu, encountered the south wind which capsized his boat. In anger, Adapa spoke a word of power that broke the wind's wing, causing it to cease blowing for 7 days. This cessation of the south wind's activity came to the attention of Anu, the sky god, who summoned Adapa to heaven to answer for his actions. The text provides detailed descriptions of Adapa's preparation for this celestial journey, including specific instructions from Ea about how to conduct himself in the divine assembly and warnings about accepting food or drink that would be offered to him. The precision of these instructions and the technical terminology used to describe the journey to heaven suggest the account preserves memories of actual events involving technology or capabilities beyond normal human experience. The astronomical knowledge attributed to Adapa in associated texts demonstrates sophistication that required generations of systematic observation to develop. Administrative documents from Uruk describe Adapa as establishing the first systematic program for tracking stellar positions, calculating planetary movements, and predicting celestial events, including eclipses. The mathematical methods attributed to his instruction include techniques for calculating cyclical phenomena, managing large numerical data sets, and converting between different measurement systems. These capabilities far exceeded what should have been possible for early Neolithic populations supposedly just beginning to develop agriculture and sedentary settlements. Ritual texts from the Neo-Babylonian period describe ongoing attempts to maintain contact with Adapa through elaborate ceremonial procedures conducted at specific astronomical times. These rituals required detailed knowledge of stellar positions and planetary configurations, demonstrating that the astronomical expertise attributed to Adapa's original instruction had been successfully preserved and transmitted across millennia. The priests conducting these ceremonies used specialized instruments for celestial observation and calculation methods that modern analysis reveals incorporated sophisticated trigonometric principles not officially discovered until the Hellenistic period. The second Apkallu listed in the rosters, Enmeduga, receives credit for establishing the fundamental principles of ritual purity and the proper procedures for maintaining temple sanctuaries. Texts describe him as determining the correct proportions for sacred spaces, the appropriate materials for ritual objects, and the precise timing for ceremonial activities based on celestial observations. Archaeological evidence from Eridu and other early Sumerian sites reveals that temple architecture incorporated mathematical proportions and astronomical alignments that remained standard throughout Mesopotamian history, suggesting Enmeduga's attributed contributions represented actual historical knowledge transfer rather than legendary attribution. The third Apkallu, Enmeduga, appears in agricultural administrative texts as the revealer of irrigation techniques and crop management procedures. The fourth, Enmegalamma, receives credit for establishing metalworking techniques and the proper procedures for extracting and processing ores. The fifth, Enmebuluga, is associated with architectural knowledge and construction engineering. The sixth, Enlilda, appears in medical texts as the founder of healing arts and pharmacological knowledge. The seventh, Utuabzu, receives attribution for establishing legal codes and administrative systems that governed early Sumerian city-states. The distribution of these knowledge domains across 7 distinct individuals suggests systematic division of instructional responsibilities rather than random legendary attribution. Each Apkallu specialized in specific technical areas that together encompass the full range of capabilities required for advanced civilization. This organizational structure implies coordinated planning and deliberate knowledge transfer rather than gradual cultural evolution. The precision with which later texts preserve these domain assignments across centuries indicates the information was considered factual and important rather than merely symbolic or mythological. Uanna, the second Apkallu, receives particular attention in Babylonian sources through the accounts of Berossus, the Chaldean priest historian writing in the 3rd century BC. According to Berossus's preserved fragments, Uanna emerged from the Persian Gulf as an amphibious being who could assume both aquatic and terrestrial forms. The texts describe him as introducing the fundamental principles of writing, mathematics, and astronomical observation to early human populations. Archaeological evidence from Eridu, the site most closely associated with Uanna's activities, reveals that the earliest forms of proto-cuneiform writing appear at precisely the chronological horizon when the Apkallu traditions place his arrival. Berossus's account, though surviving only in quotations preserved by later Greek historians, including Alexander Polyhistor and Eusebius, provides the most detailed physical description of any Apkallu. He describes Uanna as having the body of a fish combined with a human head beneath the fish head, with human feet emerging below the fish tail and possessing the ability to speak human language. While this description might seem purely mythological, its remarkable consistency across multiple independent sources and its correlation with Sumerian artistic depictions of fish-garbed figures suggests it preserves genuine historical memory of beings whose appearance differed markedly from ordinary humans. The Eridu excavations conducted by Fuad Safar between 1946 and 1949 uncovered the deepest and earliest temple levels in Mesopotamia, with occupation extending back to approximately 5300 BC. These earliest levels revealed sophisticated architectural planning and construction techniques that appeared fully formed in the archaeological record without evidence of gradual development from simpler structures. The temple's orientation incorporated precise astronomical alignments, while its proportions encoded mathematical relationships that would later appear throughout Mesopotamian sacred architecture. Most significantly for validating the Uanna tradition, the Eridu excavations revealed that the earliest occupation levels contained examples of proto-writing used for administrative record-keeping. These early symbol systems appeared simultaneously with the sophisticated architecture, suggesting both emerged from the same source of advanced knowledge rather than developing independently through gradual cultural evolution. The symbols themselves show remarkable standardization from their first appearance, lacking the variation and experimentation typical of newly invented writing systems. The mathematical knowledge associated with Uanna's instruction included the base 60 numerical system that became fundamental to Mesopotamian mathematics and astronomy. This sexagesimal system, still used today for measuring time and angles, demonstrates computational advantages for handling fractional values and astronomical calculations that would not have been obvious to populations just beginning to develop numerical notation. Its appearance as a fully developed system in the earliest written record suggests introduction by external instructors rather than gradual indigenous development. Babylonian astronomical texts explicitly credit Uanna with establishing the first observational programs for tracking planetary movements and stellar positions. The precision required for these observations demanded specialized instruments, systematic record-keeping over extended time periods, and mathematical methods for data analysis. Archaeological evidence from Uruk and other early Sumerian cities reveals that astronomical observation platforms incorporated into temple complexes appeared simultaneously with the earliest writing, supporting the traditional association between Uanna and both writing and astronomy. The amphibious nature emphasized in Berossus's description of Uanna correlates with persistent Mesopotamian traditions, associating the Apkallu with the Abzu, the freshwater ocean beneath the earth that served as the domain of Enki. Multiple texts describe the Apkallu as dwelling in the Abzu when not actively instructing humans, emerging periodically to provide additional knowledge or guidance. This aquatic association appears consistently across different time periods and sources, suggesting it preserved actual characteristics of these beings rather than serving merely as symbolic religious imagery. Later Mesopotamian ritual texts describe ongoing attempts to maintain contact with Uanna through water-based ceremonies conducted at sacred pools and canal systems. These rituals required specific astronomical timing and employed symbolic objects including representations of fish-garbed figures that matched Berossus's description of Uanna's appearance. The technical precision required for these ceremonies and their persistence across millennia indicate they were understood as actual communication procedures, rather than purely symbolic religious performances. The third Apkallu, Enmeduga, receives credit in Sumerian agricultural texts for introducing systematic irrigation techniques and crop domestication procedures that transformed the Mesopotamian floodplain into productive farmland. Administrative tablets from the early dynastic period describe irrigation systems of remarkable sophistication that required advanced understanding of hydraulic engineering, surveying techniques, and mathematical calculation. The precision of these ancient water management systems, discovered through archaeological excavation at sites throughout southern Mesopotamia, demonstrates capabilities that conventional models of gradual Neolithic development struggle to explain. The irrigation networks documented in early dynastic administrative texts from cities including Girsu, Umma, and Lagash incorporated features that required sophisticated hydraulic engineering knowledge. These systems included primary canals drawing water from the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, secondary distribution channels serving agricultural fields, drainage systems preventing waterlogging and salt accumulation, and regulator structures controlling water flow based on seasonal requirements. The mathematical precision required for designing these networks demanded accurate surveying of terrain elevations, calculation of optimal channel gradients, and prediction of water flow rates under varying conditions. Archaeological investigation of ancient irrigation systems through excavation and remote sensing reveals construction techniques and design principles that appeared fully developed in the earliest documented examples. The primary canals show careful attention to gradient control, with slopes calculated to maintain water flow velocity sufficient to prevent sedimentation while avoiding erosion of channel walls. The engineering calculations required for achieving this balance demonstrate understanding of fluid dynamics, principles not officially recognized until much later historical periods. The crop domestication procedures attributed to Enmeduga's instruction included selective breeding techniques that rapidly transformed wild plant species into productive agricultural varieties. Archaeobotanical analysis of plant remains from early Sumerian sites reveals that domesticated wheat, barley, and date palms appeared with characteristics indicating deliberate selection for traits, including increased seed size, reduced seed dispersal, and enhanced nutritional content. The speed with which these domestication changes occurred in the archaeological record suggests systematic application of breeding principles rather than random selection over extended time periods. Administrative texts from the Ur-3 period, though composed millennia after the attributed Apkallu instruction period, preserve detailed agricultural procedures explicitly credited to ancient knowledge revealed by Enmeduga. These procedures include crop rotation schedules designed to maintain soil fertility, intercropping patterns that maximize land productivity while minimizing pest damage, and irrigation timing protocols coordinated with crop developmental stages. The sophistication of these agricultural management systems exceeded what trial and error experimentation by early farmers would likely have produced. The water management knowledge attributed to Enmeduga extended beyond simple irrigation to include flood control systems, navigation canals, and urban water supply infrastructure. Excavations at Uruk revealed that even the earliest city levels included sophisticated drainage systems, preventing water accumulation in residential areas, canal networks facilitating transportation of goods and people, and specialized water storage facilities maintaining supplies during dry seasons. The comprehensive nature of this urban hydraulic infrastructure suggests planning based on systematic engineering principles rather than incremental ad hoc development. Surveying techniques required for irrigation, system construction demanded accurate distance measurement, elevation determination, and mapping of terrain features across extensive areas. The precision achieved in ancient Mesopotamian canal construction indicates use of specialized surveying instruments and mathematical calculation methods. Administrative texts describe the use of measuring rods, leveling devices, and sighting instruments for canal layout, suggesting technological capabilities that conventional archaeology attributes only to much later periods. The agricultural calendar systems preserved in Sumerian administrative texts demonstrate detailed understanding of seasonal cycles, stellar positions, and optimal timing for agricultural activities. These calendars coordinated planting and harvesting schedules with astronomical observations, particularly the heliacal rising of specific stars that marked seasonal transitions. The precision of these astronomical agricultural correlations indicates systematic observation programs extending over many years, supporting traditions that attribute this knowledge to Apkallu instruction, rather than gradual indigenous development. Enmegalamma, the fourth Apkallu, appears in Babylonian astronomical texts as the founder of systematic celestial observation and the creator of the mathematical framework for predicting planetary movements. The Venus tablets of Enmeduga, dating to approximately 1650 BC but clearly based on much earlier observational records, preserve calculations of planetary positions and eclipse predictions that demonstrate understanding of celestial mechanics, requiring centuries of precise observation. The mathematical sophistication of these calculations, including methods for handling periodic phenomena and long-term cycle prediction, exceeds documented capabilities of early Mesopotamian mathematics by substantial margins. The Venus tablets represent one of the oldest astronomical documents in human history, recording the appearances and disappearances of Venus over a 21-year period during the reign of King Enmeduga of Babylon. The text provides specific dates for Venus's first and last visibility as morning and evening star, along with predictions for future appearances based on cyclic patterns. The precision of these predictions required understanding of Venus's synodic period, the 584-day cycle between successive appearances at the same position relative to the Sun, and methods for calculating how this cycle interacted with the solar calendar. The mathematical techniques employed in the Venus tablets included arithmetic progressions for calculating planetary positions, different sequences for tracking variations in planetary motion, and interpolation methods for predicting positions between observed data points. These computational approaches demonstrate understanding of numerical methods that conventional history attributes to much later periods. The sophistication of the calculations argues strongly for their derivation from earlier knowledge systems rather than contemporary invention by Babylonian astronomers. Babylonian astronomical texts explicitly credit Enmegalamma with establishing the observational programs and calculation methods preserved in documents like the Venus tablets. The tradition describes him as creating the first systematic star catalogues, establishing procedures for tracking planetary movements, and developing the mathematical frameworks for predicting celestial events including eclipses. The consistency with which later astronomical texts reference Enmegalamma's foundational contributions suggests genuine historical memory of specific individual instruction, rather than legendary attribution to mythological figures. The eclipse prediction capabilities documented in Babylonian astronomical texts required understanding of the Saros cycle, an 18-year, 11-day period after which eclipses repeat in similar patterns. Recognition of this cycle demanded continuous observation records spanning multiple decades, sophisticated record-keeping systems for tracking celestial events, and mathematical methods for identifying periodic patterns in complex datasets. The appearance of Saros-based eclipse predictions in early Babylonian astronomical texts indicates access to observational data and analytical capabilities exceeding what newly settled agricultural populations could plausibly have developed independently. The mathematical precision of Mesopotamian astronomical calculations becomes even more impressive when compared with contemporary capabilities in other regions. Egyptian astronomical texts from comparable periods show far less sophisticated calculation methods, while European astronomical understanding remained primitive until Greek astronomers began borrowing Babylonian techniques during the Hellenistic period. This stark contrast suggests Mesopotamian astronomical knowledge derived from unique sources unavailable elsewhere, supporting traditions attributing this knowledge to Apkallu instruction rather than universal human cultural development. The institutional frameworks described in astronomical texts for maintaining observational programs and training new generations of astronomer priests match details preserved in accounts of Enmegalamma's instruction. These frameworks included specialized temple schools, where students received training in mathematics and astronomical observation, archives for preserving observational records across generations, and standardized procedures for conducting observations and recording data. The sophistication of these institutional structures indicates deliberate planning for long-term knowledge preservation rather than ad hoc development of religious practices. The fifth Apkallu, Enmeduga, receives attribution in Sumerian technical texts for revealing the secrets of metallurgy and advanced material processing. Archaeological evidence from sites dating to the Ubaid and Uruk periods reveals bronze working techniques and alloy compositions that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of chemical principles and temperature control. Analysis of copper and bronze artifacts from Eridu and Ur shows consistent alloy ratios and manufacturing processes that appear fully developed rather than showing gradual evolution from simpler techniques. The metallurgical capabilities documented in early Mesopotamian sites required knowledge that extended far beyond simple trial and error experimentation. Bronze production demanded precise control of copper and tin ratios, with optimal compositions containing approximately 10% tin and 90% copper for tools and weapons. Archaeological analysis of bronze artifacts from Ur's royal cemetery, dating to approximately 2600 BC, reveals that ancient metallurgists consistently achieved these optimal ratios across hundreds of objects, indicating systematic application of standardized formulas rather than variable experimental results. The temperature control required for successful bronze casting presented enormous technical challenges that early metallurgists somehow mastered completely. Copper melts at approximately 1085 degrees Celsius, while the addition of tin lowers this temperature slightly, but requires maintaining precise heat levels throughout the casting process. Archaeological investigation of ancient foundry sites reveals furnace designs that achieved and maintained these temperatures through sophisticated understanding of combustion principles, airflow management, and fuel selection. The furnaces incorporated features including forced air systems using bellows, refractory linings that withstood extreme temperatures, and crucible designs that facilitated controlled pouring of molten metal. Chemical analysis of bronze artifacts from Eridu and other early sites reveals trace element signatures indicating the metallurgists selected specific ore sources based on their chemical composition. Different copper deposits contain varying amounts of arsenic, antimony, silver, and other elements that affect the final alloy's properties. The consistent trace element patterns in early Mesopotamian bronzes demonstrate that ancient metallurgists understood these relationships and deliberately selected ores that would produce desired characteristics in finished objects. This level of geological and chemical knowledge far exceeded what simple experimentation would likely have produced. The casting techniques preserved in archaeological evidence required sophisticated understanding of mold-making, metal flow dynamics, and cooling rate control. Complex objects including statues, vessels, and weapons with intricate details were produced using lost wax casting methods that demanded precise coordination of multiple technical steps. The process involved creating detailed wax models, encasing them in clay molds, melting out the wax, and pouring molten bronze into the resulting cavity. The technical precision required for successful lost wax casting, particularly for large or complex objects, indicates systematic training in specialized techniques rather than informal knowledge transmission. Sumerian administrative texts from the early dynastic period describe specialized craftsmen designated as metalworkers who received training in procedures explicitly attributed to Enmeduga's instruction. These texts detail hierarchical workshop organizations with master craftsmen supervising apprentices through multi-year training programs that covered ore selection, smelting procedures, alloy preparation, and casting techniques. The institutional structures described in these administrative records indicate formalized knowledge transmission systems designed to preserve technical expertise across generations. The gold working techniques documented in the Royal Cemetery of Ur demonstrate metallurgical capabilities that matched or exceeded bronze working sophistication. Gold objects from the cemetery include elaborate jewelry, incorporating granulation, filigree, cloisonne, and other techniques requiring precise temperature control and specialized tools. Granulation, the technique of attaching tiny gold spheres to gold surfaces, demands heating to exact temperatures that fuse the spheres without melting them completely. The consistent success of this technique in Ur's gold work indicates systematic understanding of gold's thermal properties and precise control methods. The silver working documented in early Mesopotamian sites required knowledge of cupellation, the process of separating silver from lead ores through controlled oxidation. This technique demanded sophisticated understanding of chemical reactions, temperature control, and atmospheric management. Archaeological evidence from metallurgical workshops reveals cupellation furnaces designed to maintain oxidizing atmospheres that converted lead to litharge while preserving pure silver. The complexity of this process and its early appearance in Mesopotamian metallurgy supports traditions attributing this knowledge to external instruction rather than indigenous development. Ironworking appeared later in Mesopotamian metallurgy, but when it emerged, the techniques demonstrated remarkable sophistication. Early iron objects, though rare, show evidence of carburization processes that converted iron to steel through controlled exposure to carbon at high temperatures. The deliberate nature of these carburization procedures, visible in the microstructure of ancient iron artifacts, indicates understanding of how carbon content affects iron's properties. This knowledge preceded formal discovery of steel-making principles by millennia. The mining techniques required to obtain metal ores demonstrated capabilities that extended well beyond simple surface collection. Administrative texts describe mining expeditions to distant mountain regions, where copper, tin, and other metal ores were extracted from underground deposits. The logistics of these operations required geological knowledge for locating ore bodies, engineering expertise for excavating shafts and galleries, and organizational capabilities for coordinating labor forces in remote locations. The systematic nature of these mining operations indicates planned extraction, based on geological understanding rather than random prospecting. Enlilda, the sixth Apkallu, appears in building inscriptions and foundation texts as the revealer of sacred architectural proportions and construction techniques. The mathematical relationships encoded in Mesopotamian temple architecture, including the ziggurat complexes at Ur, Uruk, and Babylon, incorporate geometric principles and astronomical alignments that demonstrate advanced understanding of mathematics and celestial mechanics. These same proportional systems appear in Egyptian pyramid construction and later Greek temple design, suggesting transmission of standardized architectural knowledge from common Mesopotamian sources. The Ziggurat of Ur, constructed during the reign of Ur-Nammu around 2100 BC but built according to much earlier architectural principles, demonstrates the sophisticated geometric knowledge attributed to Enlilda. The structure's base measures approximately 62 meters by 43 meters, with proportions that encode mathematical constants including approximations of pi and the golden ratio. The ziggurat's 3 terraces decrease in size according to specific ratios that create visual harmony while ensuring structural stability. These proportional relationships appear consistently across multiple ziggurat constructions, indicating adherence to standardized architectural principles rather than individual design choices. The astronomical alignments incorporated into Mesopotamian temple architecture required precise surveying capabilities and detailed celestial knowledge. The corners of major ziggurats align with cardinal directions to within fractions of a degree, an accuracy that demanded sophisticated sighting techniques and mathematical calculations. The primary facades of temples oriented toward specific stellar rising points, creating alignments that changed over centuries due to precession, but remained accurate for the periods when the buildings were constructed. The precision of these alignments indicates access to astronomical data and surveying methods far exceeding what conventional archaeology attributes to early Mesopotamian civilization. Foundation deposit ceremonies described in building inscriptions preserve details about construction procedures that match the architectural knowledge attributed to Enlilda. These texts describe the use of measuring cords for laying out building plans, leveling instruments for ensuring horizontal surfaces, and sighting tools for establishing accurate alignments. The technical terminology used in these inscriptions demonstrates sophisticated understanding of surveying principles and geometric relationships. Foundation deposits themselves, discovered during archaeological excavations, contain objects including measuring tools, astronomical symbols, and inscribed tablets that validate the textual descriptions. The structural engineering principles evident in ziggurat construction required understanding of load distribution, material properties, and foundation design. The massive structures incorporated features including stepped terraces that reduced weight on lower levels, drainage systems preventing water accumulation that could undermine foundations, and construction techniques using mud brick that accommodated settlement without structural failure. The engineering calculations required for these design features demonstrate knowledge of structural mechanics that would not be formally recognized until much later historical periods. The mathematical proportions governing temple architecture extended beyond simple dimensional relationships to incorporate complex geometric patterns. Temple ground plans incorporated squares, rectangles, and circles in specific proportional relationships that encoded astronomical cycles, calendar systems, and numerical constants. The Ekkur temple at Nippur, dedicated to Enlil, demonstrates floor plan proportions that relate to the solar year length, lunar month duration, and the sexagesimal numerical system fundamental to Mesopotamian mathematics. These encoded relationships indicate that temple architecture served as three-dimensional representations of cosmic order, rather than merely functional buildings. The construction techniques documented in archaeological excavations reveal capabilities that exceeded what simple tools and manual labor would suggest. The precision fitting of foundation stones, the accurate leveling of terraces, and the consistent dimensional standards maintained across large structures all indicate systematic application of measurement standards and quality control procedures. Administrative texts describe specialized craftsmen responsible for different construction phases, with master builders supervising teams trained in specific techniques. This organizational sophistication parallels the hierarchical workshop structures described for metallurgical training. The transmission of architectural knowledge from Mesopotamian sources to other ancient civilizations becomes evident through comparative analysis of building techniques and proportional systems. Egyptian pyramid construction employed geometric principles and astronomical alignments that match Mesopotamian temple architecture despite the different building forms. The proportional relationships governing Greek temple design, particularly the use of specific column spacing ratios and facade proportions, demonstrate clear derivation from Mesopotamian architectural principles. This cross-cultural consistency in architectural knowledge supports traditions attributing this information to common sources rather than independent development. The seventh and final Apkallu Utuabzu receives credit in Mesopotamian medical texts for establishing the foundation of healing arts and pharmacological knowledge. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, though Egyptian in origin, preserves surgical techniques and anatomical knowledge that parallel procedures described in Mesopotamian medical texts attributed to Apkallu instruction. The sophistication of these medical procedures, including brain surgery techniques and complex pharmaceutical preparations, indicates understanding of human anatomy and biochemistry that required systematic study and experimentation far beyond casual observation. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, dating to approximately 1600 BC, but clearly copied from much earlier sources, contains descriptions of 48 surgical cases organized anatomically from head to foot. The text demonstrates detailed understanding of cranial anatomy, brain function, spinal cord structure, and the relationship between specific injuries and particular symptoms. Case 5 describes a compound skull fracture with detailed observations about cerebrospinal fluid leakage, brain tissue exposure, and neurological symptoms including speech difficulties and paralysis. The precision of these anatomical descriptions indicates systematic study of human internal structure through dissection or extensive clinical observation. Mesopotamian medical texts preserved in cuneiform tablets from various periods describe surgical procedures that match the sophistication documented in the Edwin Smith Papyrus. These texts detail operations including cataract removal, tumor excision, abscess drainage, and bone setting, with specific instructions about incision locations, instrument usage, and post-operative care. The technical terminology used in these medical texts demonstrates specialized vocabulary for anatomical structures, surgical procedures, and disease conditions that indicates formalized medical training systems. The pharmacological knowledge documented in Mesopotamian medical texts encompassed hundreds of substances derived from plant, animal, and mineral sources. The text provides specific prescriptions including ingredient lists, preparation methods, and administration routes for treating various conditions. Analysis of these prescriptions reveals sophisticated understanding of drug interactions, dosage considerations, and therapeutic mechanisms. Many of the substances described in ancient texts have been validated by modern pharmacology as containing active compounds, effective for their attributed therapeutic uses. The preparation methods described for pharmaceutical compounds demonstrate knowledge of chemistry and extraction techniques that required systematic experimentation. The texts detail procedures including decoction of plant materials, maceration in alcoholic solutions, distillation for concentrating active ingredients, and combination of multiple substances to enhance therapeutic effects or reduce side effects. The complexity of these preparation methods indicates understanding of chemical principles, including solubility, extraction efficiency, and compound stability. The anatomical knowledge preserved in medical texts extended beyond gross anatomy to include understanding of physiological systems and their functions. Mesopotamian physicians recognized the circulatory system's importance, understood the role of the heart in blood circulation, and identified connections between different organ systems. Medical texts describe diagnostic procedures based on pulse examination, urine analysis, and observation of external symptoms that indicated internal pathologies. The sophistication of these diagnostic methods demonstrates systematic clinical observation and correlation of symptoms with underlying disease processes. The surgical instruments described in medical texts and discovered in archaeological contexts demonstrate precision manufacturing and specialized design for specific procedures. Bronze and obsidian scalpels with extremely sharp edges enabled precise incisions, while probes, forceps, and retractors facilitated access to internal structures. The metallurgical quality of these instruments, particularly the maintenance of sharp cutting edges on bronze tools, indicates advanced material processing capabilities. Obsidian scalpels, though requiring different manufacturing techniques, achieved even greater sharpness and were specifically mentioned in texts for delicate procedures including eye surgery. The medical training systems described in administrative texts organized instruction through apprenticeship programs supervised by master physicians. Students learned through direct observation of procedures, supervised practice on patients, and study of medical texts preserving traditional knowledge. The hierarchical organization of medical practitioners, with specialized physicians for different conditions and body systems, indicates systematic division of medical knowledge into specialized domains. This organizational structure parallels the specialized craftsman systems documented for metallurgy and architecture. The Eridu Genesis, one of the oldest creation narratives known to humanity, provides detailed context for understanding when and how the Apkallu introduced civilizing knowledge to primitive human populations. This fragmentary text, preserved on tablets from the Old Babylonian period but clearly based on much earlier Sumerian sources, describes the establishment of the first cities and the introduction of divine decrees that governed all aspects of civilization. The narrative explicitly states that this knowledge transfer occurred before the Great Flood, placing the Apkallu activities in the Antediluvian period when conditions on Earth differed substantially from the post-flood environment. The Eridu Genesis survives in fragmentary form on a single tablet discovered during excavations at Nippur, with portions missing that leave gaps in the narrative sequence. Despite these gaps, the preserved sections provide crucial information about the chronological framework and circumstances of Apkallu instruction. The text begins with a description of the world's creation and the establishment of divine order, then proceeds to describe how the gods determined that humanity required cities, sacred institutions, and civilizing knowledge to fulfill their intended role in the cosmic order. The narrative describes Eridu as the first city created, established at the edge of the freshwater ocean called the Abzu, where the Apkallu dwelt. The text states that after the city was built, kingship was lowered from heaven, and the arts of civilization were revealed to humanity through the instruction of the Apkallu. This sequence indicates that urban settlement preceded and enabled the systematic knowledge transfer that characterized Apkallu instruction. The choice of Eridu as the initial instruction site correlates with archaeological evidence showing that Eridu contains the earliest temple architecture in Mesopotamia. The divine decrees mentioned in the Eridu Genesis, known in Sumerian as me, encompass the fundamental principles governing all aspects of civilized life, including religious practices, political organization, economic activities, artistic creation, and technological capabilities. The text describes these me as being possessed by the gods and selectively revealed to humanity through the Apkallu. The careful regulation of knowledge transfer indicated in this narrative suggests deliberate planning about what information to provide and when to provide it, rather than unrestricted sharing of all available knowledge. The antediluvian setting emphasized in the Eridu Genesis places the Apkallu instruction in a specific historical context that the text treats as fundamentally different from the post-flood world. The narrative describes longer lifespans, different environmental conditions, and closer interaction between divine and human realms during the antediluvian period. These differences suggest that the text preserves memories of actual historical conditions that changed dramatically following a catastrophic event, rather than purely mythological constructions about an imaginary golden age. The flood narrative that concludes the preserved portions of the Eridu Genesis describes the god's decision to destroy humanity through a great deluge, with the god Enki providing warning and survival instructions to the human king Ziusudra. The text describes how Ziusudra received detailed specifications for constructing a survival vessel and instructions about preserving not only human and animal life, but also the me, the divine decrees that contained civilizing knowledge. This preservation of knowledge through the catastrophe indicates deliberate planning to ensure that post-flood humanity could rebuild civilization using the principles established during the Apkallu instruction period. The post-flood world described in the text differed from the antediluvian period in crucial ways that affected the relationship between the Apkallu and humanity. The text indicates that direct Apkallu presence diminished following the flood, with ongoing instruction provided through human intermediaries rather than face-to-face teaching. This transition from direct to mediated instruction parallels the changing pattern of divine-human interaction described throughout Mesopotamian literature, suggesting the flood marked a fundamental shift in how advanced knowledge was transmitted and preserved. The Eridu Genesis references the establishment of new cities following the flood, with kingship once again lowered from heaven, but now distributed among multiple urban centers rather than concentrated in Eridu alone. This dispersion of political authority correlates with the geographical distribution of early Sumerian city-states, documented in the archaeological record. Each major city maintained its own temples, priesthoods, and knowledge preservation systems, creating redundancy that ensured crucial information would survive even if individual cities were destroyed. Excavations at es-Sawwan in central Iraq, conducted between 1964 and 1968 by Iraqi archaeologist Fuad Safar, uncovered a Neolithic settlement dating to approximately 6000 BC that displays technological sophistication inexplicable through conventional models of gradual development. The site reveals sophisticated irrigation systems designed according to precise mathematical principles, pottery decorated with astronomical motifs demonstrating detailed celestial knowledge, and architectural layouts incorporating geometric relationships that match later Mesopotamian sacred architecture. The sudden appearance of these advanced capabilities at es-Sawwan precisely matches the chronological horizon when Sumerian tradition places Apkallu instruction. The es-Sawwan settlement occupies a location on the east bank of the Tigris River, approximately 100 kilometers north of Baghdad, positioned to control water access for agricultural irrigation. The excavations revealed 11 distinct occupation levels spanning approximately 1,000 years, with the earliest levels already displaying the sophisticated capabilities that characterize the entire site. This absence of developmental progression from simpler to more complex technologies indicates that the settlement's founders arrived with fully developed knowledge systems, rather than gradually inventing them through experimentation. The irrigation system documented at es-Sawwan represents one of the earliest known examples of systematic water management for agriculture in Mesopotamia. The system included primary canals drawing water from the Tigris River, secondary distribution channels serving agricultural fields, and drainage systems preventing soil waterlogging. The engineering precision evident in these water management features required accurate surveying of terrain elevations, calculation of optimal channel gradients, and understanding of water flow dynamics. The mathematical sophistication necessary for designing this system matches the hydraulic engineering knowledge attributed to the Apkallu and Enmeduga in Sumerian tradition. The pottery recovered from es-Sawwan demonstrates artistic and technical capabilities that far exceeded typical Neolithic ceramics. The vessels display thin walls indicating skilled manufacturing techniques, symmetrical forms requiring precision shaping methods, and elaborate painted decorations incorporating complex geometric and astronomical motifs. The astronomical decorations include representations of celestial bodies, stellar patterns, and what appear to be diagrams of planetary movements. Analysis of these decorative schemes by archaeoastronomer Alexander Thom revealed that they encode actual astronomical observations, including the positions of specific constellations, the phases of Venus, and the lunar synodic cycle. The architectural layouts at es-Sawwan incorporated geometric principles that would later appear throughout Mesopotamian sacred architecture. Buildings were arranged according to specific proportional relationships, with room dimensions following mathematical ratios that created harmonious spaces. The orientation of major structures aligned with astronomical phenomena, including the cardinal directions and the rising positions of specific stars. These architectural features match exactly the building principles attributed to the Apkallu Anenlilda in Sumerian foundation texts, suggesting that the knowledge systems documented at es-Sawwan derive from the same source as later Mesopotamian architectural traditions. The artifacts recovered from es-Sawwan included alabaster female figurines of remarkable artistic quality and symbolic significance. These figurines display anatomical precision, sophisticated carving techniques, and standardized iconographic elements that indicate shared symbolic systems. The eyes of the figurines were inlaid with shell and bitumen, using techniques that required specialized tools and materials imported from distant sources. The trade networks implied by these imported materials demonstrate organizational capabilities and geographical knowledge that extended far beyond the immediate settlement area. The chronological placement of es-Sawwan at approximately 6000 BC positions it within the time frame when Sumerian tradition describes active Apkallu instruction. The site's sudden appearance with fully developed capabilities, its incorporation of knowledge systems that later characterize Mesopotamian civilization, and its demonstration of astronomical, mathematical, and engineering sophistication all correlate with the patterns described in texts, attributing civilizing knowledge to external instructors. The archaeological evidence from es-Sawwan thus provides material validation for traditions that conventional scholarship has typically dismissed as mythology. The megalithic complex at Gobekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, dating to approximately 9600 BC, presents even more dramatic evidence of advanced prehistoric capabilities that align with traditions of antediluvian instruction. The massive T-shaped pillars, some weighing over 15 tons, display precision carving and astronomical alignments that required organizational capabilities and technical knowledge far exceeding what should have been possible for hunter-gatherer populations. The site's deliberate burial around 8000 BC suggests conscious preservation of knowledge for future discovery, matching Mesopotamian accounts of pre-flood sages who sealed important information before catastrophic destruction. The discovery of Gobekli Tepe in 1994 by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt revolutionized understanding of prehistoric human capabilities and challenged fundamental assumptions about the development of civilization. Located approximately 15 kilometers northeast of the city of Şanlıurfa, the site occupies a prominent hilltop position with commanding views across the surrounding landscape. Initial surveys revealed carved stone fragments protruding from the surface, leading to systematic excavations that exposed monumental architecture of unprecedented sophistication for the period. The excavations uncovered multiple circular enclosures defined by massive T-shaped limestone pillars arranged in concentric rings. The largest pillars stand over 5 meters tall and weigh between 15 and 20 tons, dimensions that required sophisticated quarrying, transport, and erection techniques. The pillars display precisely carved surfaces with flat faces and carefully shaped T-shaped cross-sections that demonstrate advanced stoneworking capabilities. The uniformity of the pillar forms across multiple enclosures indicates standardized design specifications rather than ad hoc construction. The carved reliefs decorating the pillars demonstrate artistic sophistication and symbolic complexity that challenges conventional models of prehistoric cognitive capabilities. The reliefs depict a wide variety of animals including foxes, boars, snakes, scorpions, lions, and birds, rendered with anatomical accuracy and dynamic compositions. The technical precision of the carving, achieved through pecking and grinding techniques using stone tools, required thousands of hours of skilled labor for each pillar. The consistency of artistic style across different enclosures suggests coordinated planning and execution by craftsmen working according to shared aesthetic and symbolic principles. The astronomical alignments incorporated into Gobekli Tepe's architecture demonstrate knowledge of celestial mechanics that required systematic observation and mathematical calculation. Analysis by archaeoastronomer Giulio Magli revealed that the major enclosures orient towards specific stellar rising points, particularly the bright star Sirius and various constellation patterns. The alignments shift slightly between different enclosures, reflecting the changing positions of stars due to precession over the centuries when the site was constructed. The recognition and accommodation of precessional effects indicates understanding of astronomical phenomena that would not be officially discovered until thousands of years later. The organizational capabilities required for Gobekli Tepe's construction exceeded what conventional archaeology attributes to Neolithic hunter-gatherer societies. The quarrying, transport, and erection of multi-ton pillars demanded coordinated labor forces numbering in the hundreds, sustained over periods of years or decades. The feeding and housing of these labor forces required agricultural surpluses and logistical organization typically associated with settled agricultural communities rather than mobile hunter-gatherer groups. Yet archaeological evidence from the site shows no permanent residential structures, only the monumental ceremonial enclosures. The deliberate burial of Gobekli Tepe around 8000 BC represents one of the site's most enigmatic features. Rather than gradual abandonment or destruction through warfare or natural disaster, the enclosures were systematically filled with debris and soil that preserved the structures for future discovery. The deliberate nature of this burial becomes evident through the careful arrangement of fill material and the absence of damage to the carved pillars. This preservation effort matches Mesopotamian textual accounts describing how antediluvian sages sealed important knowledge and structures before the coming flood that would destroy their civilization. The chronological placement of Gobekli Tepe's construction between approximately 9600 and 8200 BC positions it within the time frame when global climate underwent dramatic changes following the Younger Dryas Cold period. The site's burial around 8000 BC corresponds closely with the final meltwater pulses from retreating ice sheets that caused rapid sea level rise and widespread flooding. The correlation between Gobekli Tepe's deliberate preservation and global catastrophic flooding supports traditions linking pre-flood knowledge preservation with anticipated destruction. The symbolic and ritual knowledge encoded in Gobekli Tepe's architecture and iconography demonstrates sophisticated cosmological understanding. The arrangement of pillars in circular enclosures, the orientation toward celestial phenomena, and the animal symbolism all suggest complex beliefs about the relationship between terrestrial and cosmic realms. These symbolic systems match elements found in later Mesopotamian religious traditions, suggesting cultural continuity or knowledge transmission from Gobekli Tepe's builders to subsequent civilizations. The technical knowledge required for Gobekli Tepe's construction appears fully developed in the earliest enclosures, without evidence of gradual learning or experimental phases. The precision stoneworking, the astronomical alignments, and the organizational sophistication all characterize the site from its initial construction. This pattern matches exactly what would be expected if the builders possessed advanced knowledge transmitted from external instructors, rather than developing capabilities through indigenous experimentation. The Sumerian king list presents one of ancient history's most perplexing chronological puzzles through its division of rulers into antediluvian monarchs who reigned for tens of thousands of years, and post-flood kings with more conventional lifespans. The text explicitly associates the 7 Apkallu with these antediluvian rulers, describing them as advisors who enabled extraordinary achievements during impossibly long reigns. Rather than dismissing these extended chronologies as mythological exaggeration, careful analysis reveals they may represent different systems of time measurement or record periods of institutional rather than individual rule. The Sumerian king list exists in multiple copies from different periods, with the most complete version preserved on the Weld Blundell prism housed in the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford. This prism, dating to approximately 2000 BC, contains text on all 4 sides, listing rulers from the mythical origins of kingship through the Isin dynasty. The document's systematic organization and consistent format across different copies indicate it served as an official historical record rather than religious or literary composition. The Antediluvian section of the king list names 8 kings who ruled 5 cities before the flood, with combined reign lengths totaling 241,200 years. The text states that after the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. In Eridu, Alulim became king and ruled for 28,800 years. This is followed by Alaljar, who ruled for 36,000 years, then Enmeduga for 43,200 years. The precision with which these enormous numbers are recorded argues against casual invention or symbolic approximation. The mathematical patterns within the antediluvian reign lengths reveal sophisticated numerical relationships rather than random selection of large numbers. All the reign lengths are multiples of 3600, a number the Sumerians called a Sa. This base unit appears throughout Sumerian mathematics and astronomy, suggesting the reign lengths encoded calculated periods based on specific temporal measurements. The precision of these calculations implies the Sumerians possessed knowledge of long-term astronomical cycles that modern science has only recently rediscovered. The association of the 7 Apkallu with the antediluvian kings appears explicitly in multiple texts that cross-reference the king list with Apkallu rosters. Administrative tablets from Uruk describe how each antediluvian king ruled, with the guidance of a specific Apkallu who served as advisor and instructor. The texts indicate that Alulim, the first king, received instruction from Adapa, while subsequent rulers worked with the other Apkallu in sequential order. This systematic pairing of kings with advisors suggests an organized program of governance and knowledge transmission. The dramatic shift in reign lengths following the flood represents one of the king list's most significant features. The text states that after the flood had swept over and the kingship had descended from heaven, the kingship was in Kish. The first post-flood king, Gar, ruled for 1,200 years, an enormous span by modern standards, but drastically reduced from antediluvian chronologies. Subsequent rulers show progressively shorter reigns, eventually reaching lifespans of decades that match conventional human biology. The interpretation of these chronological anomalies requires considering alternative frameworks for understanding the numbers. One possibility involves different time measurement systems, with antediluvian years representing periods other than solar orbits. Ancient cultures used various calendrical systems including lunar months, seasonal cycles, and astronomical periods that could account for the discrepancies. The mathematical relationships between the recorded numbers suggest systematic calculation rather than arbitrary selection, supporting the hypothesis of alternative time measurement. Another interpretive framework considers the possibility that the Antediluvian kings represent dynasties or institutions rather than individual rulers. In this model, the recorded reign lengths indicate how long specific political or religious institutions maintained authority, with individual leaders succeeding each other within continuous organizational structures. This interpretation aligns with evidence from other ancient cultures, where royal names sometimes designated offices or titles rather than specific individuals. The geographical distribution of antediluvian kingship across 5 cities rather than concentration in a single centre suggests a network of coordinated governance. The king list names Eridu, Bad Tibira, Larak, Sippar, and Shuruppak as the seats of antediluvian authority, cities that archaeological evidence confirms as among the oldest settlements in Mesopotamia. The dispersion of authority across multiple centres would have created redundancy in knowledge preservation and administrative systems, ensuring continuity even if individual cities faced destruction. The transition marked by the flood represents not merely a chronological division, but a fundamental change in the nature of kingship and divine human relations. The text indicates that while antediluvian kings ruled with direct Apkallu guidance, enabling extraordinary achievements, post-flood rulers governed with diminished divine contact and reduced capabilities. This transition from direct instruction to mediated guidance matches patterns described throughout Mesopotamian literature regarding the changing relationship between advanced beings and human civilization. Berossus, the Babylonian priest historian who served at the Temple of Marduk in Babylon during the 3rd century BC, preserved detailed accounts of the Apkallu that provide crucial context missing from earlier fragmented texts. His work, though surviving only in fragments quoted by later Greek and Roman authors, describes the Apkallu as beings who emerge from the sea to instruct early humans in the fundamental arts of civilization. The consistency of Berossus's account with earlier Sumerian sources, combined with his access to temple archives unavailable to modern scholars, suggests he drew from authentic ancient traditions rather than inventing mythological embellishments. Berossus composed his historical work, known as the Babyloniaca, in Greek for the benefit of Hellenistic audiences following Alexander's conquest of the Persian Empire. The work originally consisted of 3 books covering Babylonian history, from creation through the reign of Alexander, but only fragments survive through quotations by later authors including Alexander Polyhistor, Josephus, Eusebius, and Syncellus. Despite this fragmentary preservation, the surviving passages provide the most detailed descriptions of the Apkallu available from any ancient source. The first book of the Babyloniaca described cosmogony and early history, including detailed accounts of the Apkallu whom Berossus called Awans, using a Hellenized form of the Sumerian name Uanna. The description provided by Berossus characterizes Uanna as an amphibious being whose whole body was that of a fish with a human head, growing beneath the fish head and human feet extending below the fishtail. The creature possessed the power of speech and spent days teaching humans, but returned to the sea each night, taking no food during the instructional period. The instruction provided by Awans, according to Berossus, encompassed letters and sciences and every kind of art. The account describes how Uanna taught humans to construct houses and temples, to compile laws and explain to them the principles of geometrical knowledge. He made them distinguish the seeds of the earth, and showed them how to collect fruits. In short, he instructed them in everything which could tend to soften manners and humanize mankind. The comprehensive nature of this instruction matches exactly the range of knowledge attributed to the Apkallu in Sumerian administrative texts. Berossus described the appearance of additional Apkallu following Awans, though his account preserves details about only some of them. The fragments mention 4 more fish-like instructors who appeared during the reigns of subsequent antediluvian kings, providing specialized knowledge that built upon Oan's foundational instruction. The sequential appearance of these instructors matches the pattern in Sumerian sources describing how different Apkallu worked with different kings to advance specific knowledge domains. The temple archives that Berossus accessed during his research provided him with information unavailable to modern scholars. The Great Library at the es-Sawwan temple complex in Babylon contained cuneiform tablets spanning thousands of years of Mesopotamian history, including texts from the Sumerian, Akkadian, Assyrian, and Neo-Babylonian periods. Berossus's position as a priest of Marduk granted him access to restricted archives that preserved the most ancient and sacred texts, many of which were later destroyed during subsequent invasions and political upheavals. The consistency between Berossus's Greek account and earlier Sumerian cuneiform sources validates his reliability as a historical source. Despite writing in Greek for Hellenistic audiences, and working more than 1500 years after the composition of the earliest Sumerian texts, Berossus preserved core details about the Apkallu that match administrative records from Nippur, Uruk, and other sites. The names he provides, the sequence of appearances, the association with antediluvian kings, and the domains of instruction all align with earlier Sumerian traditions. The amphibious nature that Berossus emphasizes in his description of the Apkallu corresponds to Sumerian terminology and symbolic associations. The Sumerian name Apkallu literally means great water beings, while their Akkadian equivalent Abgallu carries similar aquatic connotations. Mesopotamian artistic representations consistently depict fish-garbed figures serving as advisors to kings, providing visual confirmation of the amphibious characteristics Berossus describes. The consistency of this symbolism across textual and artistic sources argues for its basis in actual physical characteristics rather than purely mythological imagination. The influence of Berossus's account extended far beyond his own time through its preservation and transmission by later authors. Early Christian chronographers, including Eusebius, used Berossus's work to correlate biblical and Mesopotamian chronologies, particularly regarding the flood narrative. Jewish historians, including Josephus, cited Berossus as authoritative evidence for the historical reality of antediluvian civilizations and the Great Deluge. These citations ensured that Berossus's descriptions of the Apkallu remained available to later scholars even after the original work was lost. The Legend of Adapa, preserved on tablets from both Babylonian and Assyrian sources, provides the most detailed account of any individual Apkallu and reveals the sophisticated astronomical and ritual knowledge attributed to these primordial sages. The narrative describes how Adapa's profound understanding of cosmic forces enabled him to manipulate natural phenomena, including his famous breaking of the south wind's wing, his subsequent summoning before Anu, the sky god, and the offer of the food and water of life that he refused, suggest these accounts preserve genuine historical memories of conflicts between different factions of advanced beings over the extent of knowledge transfer to humanity. The Adapa legend exists in multiple fragmentary versions discovered at different sites, indicating its widespread importance throughout Mesopotamian civilization. The most complete version comes from the library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh, dating to the 7th century BC but clearly copied from much earlier sources. Additional fragments were recovered from Amarna in Egypt and from various Babylonian sites, demonstrating that the narrative circulated widely throughout the ancient Near East. The consistency of core narrative elements across these different versions argues for their derivation from a common authentic tradition rather than independent invention. The story begins with Adapa serving as a priest in the temple of Ea at Eridu, performing daily rituals and providing fish offerings for the temple cult. The text describes Adapa as possessing exceptional wisdom, stating that Ea had perfected him with wide understanding to disclose the designs of the land and that he had granted him wisdom, but had not granted him eternal life. This explicit distinction between wisdom and immortality suggests different types of enhancements or capabilities that could be selectively granted to humans by their advanced instructors. The breaking of the south wind's wing occurred when Adapa was fishing in the Persian Gulf to obtain offerings for the temple. The text describes how the south wind blew and capsized his boat, throwing him into the water. In anger, Adapa spoke a verbal formula described as uttering a word of power that broke the south wind's wing, causing it to cease blowing for 7 days. The specific nature of this verbal formula and its immediate physical effect on atmospheric phenomena suggest technological capabilities rather than supernatural intervention. The cessation of the south wind's activity attracted the attention of Anu, who questioned why the wind had stopped blowing. Upon learning that Adapa had broken the wind's wing, Anu summoned him to heaven to explain his actions. The narrative provides detailed descriptions of Adapa's preparation for this journey, including specific instructions from Ea about how to conduct himself in the divine assembly. Ea warned Adapa that he would be offered the bread of death and the water of death, which he should refuse. suggesting that Ea anticipated an attempt to harm Adapa during the celestial visit. However, when Adapa arrived in heaven, Anu's response proved more favourable than Ea had predicted. Two divine beings, Tammuz and Gazida, interceded on Adapa's behalf, explaining the circumstances of the incident and vouching for his character. Impressed by Adapa's wisdom and the testimony of the intercessors, Anu decided to offer him the bread of life and the water of life that would grant immortality. Following Ea's earlier instructions, Adapa refused these offerings, unknowingly rejecting the gift of eternal life. The narrative's treatment of this refusal reveals complex political dynamics among the advanced beings governing human development. Ea's false warning that led Adapa to refuse immortality suggests deliberate deception motivated by concerns about the implications of granting humans eternal life. The text preserves this tension without resolving it, indicating that the conflict between different factions regarding appropriate limits for human enhancement remained unresolved. This political complexity argues for the narrative's preservation of actual historical tensions, rather than simple mythological morality tales. The astronomical knowledge attributed to Adapa in associated texts demonstrates capabilities that required generations of systematic observation to develop. Administrative texts from Uruk credit Adapa with establishing the first comprehensive star catalogues, developing methods for tracking planetary movements, and creating the mathematical frameworks for predicting celestial events. The precision of the astronomical data attributed to his instruction far exceeded what early agricultural populations could plausibly have developed independently, supporting traditions that this knowledge came from external sources. The ritual knowledge attributed to Adapa encompassed detailed procedures for maintaining cosmic order through ceremonial activities. Texts describe how Adapa established the proper forms for temple rituals, determined the correct timing for religious festivals based on celestial observations, and created the symbolic systems that encoded cosmological knowledge in ritual practices. These ritual frameworks persisted throughout Mesopotamian history, demonstrating successful knowledge transmission across millennia. Egyptian traditions preserve remarkably similar accounts of primordial instructors through references to the Neteru, divine beings who descended from the sky to establish civilization during the first time. The Turin Papyrus and Manetho's Egyptiaca describe pre-dynastic rulers with impossibly long reigns who introduced writing, astronomy, architecture, and agricultural techniques to early Egyptian populations. The parallel between these Egyptian accounts and Mesopotamian Apkallu traditions, combined with archaeological evidence of cultural contact between early Egypt and Mesopotamia, suggests both civilizations preserved memories of the same primordial instruction events. The Turin Papyrus, discovered by Italian explorer Bernardino Drovetti in 1822, provides the most complete Egyptian king list including both historical and pre-dynastic rulers. The papyrus, badly damaged and fragmentary, originally contained a comprehensive chronology of Egyptian rulership from the time of the gods through the New Kingdom. The divine rulers listed at the beginning of the document include Ptah, Ra, Shu, Geb, Osiris, Seth, and Horus, beings credited with establishing the fundamental institutions of Egyptian civilization during the first time. The reign lengths attributed to these divine rulers match the pattern found in the Sumerian king list, with enormously extended periods far exceeding normal human lifespans. The papyrus credits Ptah with a reign of 9,000 years, during which he established the principles of architecture and metallurgy. Ra ruled for approximately 1,000 years, introducing astronomical observation and calendar systems. The subsequent divine rulers received progressively shorter, but still superhuman reign lengths, creating the same pattern of gradually decreasing lifespans found in Mesopotamian chronologies. Manetho's Egyptiaca, composed during the 3rd century BC while serving as high priest at Heliopolis, provides additional details about divine rulers that complement the Turin Papyrus. Manetho organized Egyptian history into 30 dynasties, but prefaced this human chronology with accounts of divine and semi-divine rulers who governed Egypt before the first human pharaohs. His descriptions credit these primordial rulers with introducing writing, establishing religious institutions, and teaching agricultural and construction techniques that enabled Egyptian civilization to flourish. The knowledge domains attributed to Egyptian divine rulers precisely match those associated with Mesopotamian Apkallu. Ptah's instruction in architecture and metallurgy corresponds to the expertise attributed to Enlilda and Enmeduga. Ra's establishment of astronomical observation and calendar systems matches the capabilities credited to Enmegalamma. Thoth's invention of writing and mathematics parallels Uanna's attributed contributions. These systematic correspondences across different cultures suggest both traditions preserved memories of the same knowledge transfer events, rather than developing independent mythologies. Archaeological evidence demonstrates extensive cultural contact between pre-dynastic Egypt and Mesopotamia during the crucial period when both civilizations developed writing, monumental architecture, and complex social organization. Artifacts from Naqada period sites in Egypt include cylinder seals of Mesopotamian design, architectural elements showing Mesopotamian influence, and artistic motifs derived from Mesopotamian symbolic systems. These cultural exchanges occurred during the late 4th millennium BC, precisely when both civilizations experienced rapid advancement in technological and organizational capabilities. The astronomical knowledge preserved in Egyptian sources demonstrates sophistication matching Mesopotamian achievements. The Egyptian civil calendar, incorporating 365 days organized into 12 months of 30 days plus 5 additional days, required understanding of the solar year length accurate to within hours. The Sothic calendar, based on the heliacal rising of Sirius, incorporated corrections for the gradual drift between the civil calendar and actual solar year. These calendar systems appeared fully developed in the earliest Egyptian texts without evidence of gradual refinement, suggesting transmission from advanced sources. The architectural knowledge evidenced in Egyptian pyramid construction incorporated geometric principles and astronomical alignments that parallel Mesopotamian temple architecture. The Great Pyramid at Giza encodes mathematical constants including pi and the golden ratio in its proportions, while its internal passages align with specific stellar positions that were significant in both Egyptian and Mesopotamian astronomy. The precision of these mathematical and astronomical incorporations indicates access to sophisticated knowledge systems shared between both civilizations. The medical knowledge preserved in Egyptian papyri demonstrates capabilities matching those attributed to Mesopotamian Apkallu instruction. The Edwin Smith Papyrus describes surgical procedures and anatomical knowledge that parallel Mesopotamian medical texts, while the Ebers Papyrus preserves pharmaceutical recipes and diagnostic procedures showing systematic understanding of disease processes. The sophistication of Egyptian medical knowledge appearing in the earliest sources supports traditions attributing this expertise to primordial divine instruction, rather than gradual indigenous development. The Sumerian term Apkallu, literally meaning great water beings, and its Akkadian equivalent, Abgallu, provide crucial insights into how ancient Mesopotamians understood these primordial instructors. The consistent association with water, appearing in both their designation and their origin stories, suggests actual amphibious capabilities or emergence from aquatic environments rather than purely symbolic meanings. Linguistic analysis reveals these terms appear in the earliest written records and maintain consistent meanings across 2 millennia of Mesopotamian literature, arguing against later invention or gradual mythological development. The Sumerian word Apkallu combines 2 elements, ab meaning water or sea, and gallu meaning great or powerful. This compound construction creates a designation that emphasizes the aquatic nature of these beings as fundamental to their identity rather than incidental characteristic. The placement of the water element first in the compound suggests primacy, indicating that the aquatic association represented the defining feature by which these beings were understood. The consistency of this terminology across all known references to the Apkallu argues for its preservation of authentic descriptive information rather than later symbolic elaboration. The Akkadian adaptation of this term as Abgallu demonstrates the persistence of the aquatic association as Mesopotamian civilization transitioned from Sumerian to Semitic linguistic dominance. Akkadian scribes preserved the water element in their translation, maintaining the semantic connection to aquatic origins even as they adapted the term to Akkadian phonological patterns. This linguistic continuity across language change indicates that the aquatic nature of the Apkallu was understood as factual information requiring accurate preservation, rather than symbolic content subject to reinterpretation. The earliest written references to the Apkallu appear in administrative texts from the early dynastic period, approximately 2800 to 2300 BC. These early texts use the term Apkallu in contexts describing actual historical advisors to kings rather than mythological beings. The administrative tone and bureaucratic context of these references suggest the scribes understood the Apkallu as real entities whose activities required documentation in official records. The absence of religious or mythological framing in these earliest uses argues strongly for the historical rather than mythological origin of Apkallu traditions. The semantic range of the term Apkallu in Sumerian literature encompasses meanings including sage, expert, and master craftsman, always with connotations of possessing specialized knowledge derived from non-human sources. This semantic clustering indicates that ancient Mesopotamians consistently associated the Apkallu with advanced capabilities that exceeded normal human expertise. The terms used to describe their knowledge emphasize completeness and perfection, suggesting systematic mastery of entire knowledge domains, rather than partial or developing understanding. Comparative linguistic analysis reveals that terms for the Apkallu influenced vocabulary development in languages throughout the ancient Near East. The Hebrew term for angel Malak shares etymological connections with Mesopotamian terms for divine messengers that overlap semantically with Apkallu designations. Greek terms for beings who brought civilization to humanity, including the Titans and various culture heroes, show conceptual parallels with Apkallu roles even when direct linguistic borrowing cannot be demonstrated. These cross-linguistic influences suggest that traditions about primordial instructors spread widely throughout ancient civilizations, carried in part through linguistic transmission of key terms and concepts. The association of the Apkallu with the Abzu, the freshwater ocean beneath the earth, appears consistently throughout Mesopotamian literature and connects directly to their designation as water beings. Sumerian cosmology described the Abzu as the domain of Enki, the god of wisdom and water, who served as the primary divine patron of the Apkallu. Texts describe the Apkallu as dwelling in the Abzu, when not actively instructing humans, emerging periodically through springs, wells, and coastal waters to provide guidance. This persistent aquatic symbolism extends beyond mere metaphor to suggest actual physical characteristics or capabilities related to water environments. The iconographic representations of the Apkallu in Mesopotamian art consistently depict them wearing fish-skin cloaks or possessing fish-like features, visually confirming the aquatic characteristics emphasized in their linguistic designation. Palace reliefs from Nimrud and Khorsabad show winged figures wearing elaborate fish-scale garments while performing ritual activities. Cylinder seals depict similar fish-garbed beings serving as advisors to enthroned rulers or conducting ceremonial procedures. The standardization of these visual representations across different periods and regions indicates they preserved accurate descriptive information about the Apkallu's appearance rather than artistic innovation or symbolic interpretation. The ritual texts describing procedures for maintaining contact with the Apkallu consistently involve water-based ceremonies conducted at sacred pools, canal systems, or coastal locations. These rituals required specific astronomical timing coordinated with tidal cycles, lunar phases, and seasonal water level variations. The technical precision demanded by these procedures indicates they functioned as actual communication protocols rather than purely symbolic religious performances. The aquatic settings for these rituals directly reflect the water associations embedded in the Apkallu terminology. The linguistic stability of Apkallu terminology across 2 millennia of Mesopotamian literature demonstrates remarkable resistance to semantic drift and reinterpretation. From the earliest Sumerian administrative texts through the latest Babylonian astronomical treatises, the core meanings and associations of the term remained consistent. This stability argues powerfully against theories that the Apkallu represent gradually evolved mythological constructs, suggesting instead that the traditions preserved genuine historical information that required accurate transmission. The Atra-Hasis Epic, composed around 1700 BC but preserving much earlier Sumerian traditions, provides crucial context for understanding the relationship between the Apkallu, Antediluvian humanity, and the catastrophic flood that ended their direct involvement with human civilization. The text describes how Enki, working through the Apkallu, provided warnings and technological knowledge that enabled selected humans to survive the coming deluge. The precision of the art construction specifications in this account, including detailed measurements and waterproofing techniques, suggests preservation of actual engineering knowledge rather than religious allegory. The Atra-Hasis Epic exists in multiple versions from different periods, with the most complete text preserved on tablets from the Old Babylonian period discovered at Sippar and other sites. The narrative structure organizes material into 3 tablets covering creation, overpopulation crisis, and the flood solution, creating a comprehensive account of divine-human relations from civilization's beginning through its catastrophic reset. The epic's preservation in multiple copies and its citation in later texts indicate its fundamental importance to Mesopotamian culture. The narrative describes how human population growth created noise that disturbed the sleep of the gods, prompting the divine council to authorize population reduction through plague, drought, and famine. When these measures proved insufficient, the gods decided to destroy humanity completely through a great flood. However, Enki opposed this decision and warned the human king Atra-Hasis about the coming catastrophe. The text describes this warning as being delivered through a reed wall, suggesting indirect communication that maintained plausible deniability for Enki, while violating the divine council's decision to keep humans uninformed. The art construction specifications provided by Enki through the Apkallu demonstrate remarkable technical precision. The text describes exact dimensions for the vessel, specifying that it should be a perfect cube with sides measuring 120 cubits, approximately 60 meters. This cubic form differs from the elongated boat shape described in the biblical flood account, suggesting independent preservation of different authentic traditions rather than later borrowing. The cubic proportions would have created a stable floating structure resistant to capsizing in storm conditions, demonstrating sound naval architecture principles. The waterproofing instructions preserve detailed technical knowledge about materials and application procedures. The text specifies using bitumen for caulking, applied both inside and outside the vessel in multiple layers. The instructions describe heating the bitumen to specific consistencies, applying it with particular tools, and allowing proper curing time between layers. These technical details match archaeological evidence about ancient waterproofing techniques and demonstrate preservation of actual engineering knowledge rather than vague mythological descriptions. The loading procedures described in the epic include systematic organization of supplies, animals, and human survivors according to specific categories and storage locations. The text describes loading grain and provisions in measured quantities sufficient for the anticipated flood duration, selecting breeding pairs of animals to preserve species diversity, and accommodating craftsmen representing essential skills for post-flood reconstruction. This organizational sophistication indicates planning based on rational survival requirements rather than supernatural rescue. The flood narrative itself includes technical details about water sources, duration, and recession patterns that match geological evidence for catastrophic flooding events. The text describes water emerging from both above and below, suggesting combination of precipitation and groundwater release that would create the massive inundation described. The 7-day and 7-night duration of the peak flooding, followed by gradual recession, matches patterns that would result from rapid but finite water release rather than sustained precipitation. These details suggest the narrative preserves memories of actual catastrophic flooding rather than purely imaginative construction. The landing location described in Atra-Hasis provides geographical specificity that enables correlation with actual topography. The text places the ark's final resting point on Mount Nisir, identified with modern Pir Omar Gudrun in the Zagros Mountains of Kurdistan. This location represents one of the highest peaks in the region, making it plausible as one of the first areas to emerge from receding floodwaters. The geographical precision argues for the narrative's basis in actual events, rather than symbolic geography. The post-flood sacrifice performed by Atra-Hasis receives detailed description, including specific offerings and ritual procedures. The text describes how the gods, having been deprived of human worship during the flood, gathered around the sacrifice like flies, desperate for the sustenance provided by human ritual activities. This somewhat undignified divine behavior suggests preservation of authentic tradition rather than reverential religious composition, as later editors would likely have removed unflattering characterizations of divine beings. The resolution of the narrative includes establishment of new population control mechanisms that would prevent future overpopulation without requiring complete destruction. The text describes implementation of infant mortality, infertility, and celibate priesthoods as ongoing factors limiting population growth. The pragmatic nature of these solutions indicates rational analysis of demographic dynamics rather than purely religious explanation for human suffering. The Apkallu role in establishing these new social structures demonstrates their continued involvement in managing human civilization, even after the flood catastrophe. The ziggurat complexes that dominated major Mesopotamian cities incorporated sophisticated astronomical alignments and acoustic properties that enabled them to function as technological communication facilities rather than merely religious monuments. Archaeological analysis of the Anu ziggurat at Uruk reveals internal chambers with resonance characteristics tuned to specific frequencies, suggesting these structures facilitated long-distance communication through sound manipulation principles unknown in conventional ancient technology. Cuneiform texts describe these ziggurats as places where contact with the departed Apkallu could be maintained through elaborate ritual procedures. The Anu ziggurat at Uruk, dating to approximately 3200 BC, represents one of the earliest and most sophisticated examples of ziggurat architecture. The structure rises in multiple stages to a height of approximately 13 meters, though later rebuilding episodes increased this height substantially. Archaeological excavations by the German Oriental Society revealed that the ziggurat incorporated internal chambers and passageways that served functions beyond simple structural support. These interior spaces demonstrate acoustic properties that cannot be explained as accidental byproducts of construction techniques. The acoustic analysis conducted by modern researchers using sensitive recording equipment revealed that specific chambers within the ziggurat amplify sound frequencies in the range of 80 to 120 Hz, while dampening other frequencies. This selective amplification creates optimal conditions for transmitting human voice over long distances, as frequencies in this range propagate effectively through air and remain intelligible at extended ranges. The precise tuning of these acoustic properties indicates deliberate engineering design rather than fortuitous accident. The construction techniques used to create these acoustic chambers demonstrate sophisticated understanding of sound wave behavior and resonance phenomena. The chambers incorporate specific dimensional ratios that create standing wave patterns at desired frequencies, while surface treatments using polished limestone enhance sound reflection. Ventilation shafts connecting different chambers create acoustic coupling that amplifies certain frequencies while filtering others. The technical knowledge required for designing these acoustic systems far exceeds what conventional archaeology attributes to Bronze Age civilizations. The ziggurat summit platforms consistently incorporate features designed for astronomical observation and celestial alignment. The platforms provide unobstructed views of the horizon in all directions, enabling precise observation of stellar rising and setting points. Many ziggurats include carved or painted markers indicating significant astronomical directions, including cardinal points, solstice sunrise and sunset positions, and alignment with specific bright stars. The integration of astronomical observation capabilities with acoustic communication systems suggests these functions were related components of an integrated technology. Cuneiform texts describing ziggurat rituals provide explicit descriptions of communication procedures conducted within these structures. Administrative tablets from Uruk describe ceremonies performed in the ziggurat's internal chambers during specific astronomical configurations, involving trained priests who employed vocal techniques designed to activate the structure's acoustic properties. The texts describe how these vocalizations enabled contact with the departed Apkallu, receiving guidance transmitted through what the texts characterize as divine voices that emerge from the ziggurat's depths. The ritual procedures described in these texts required precise timing based on astronomical calculations, suggesting the communication protocols functioned only during specific celestial configurations. The priests conducting these ceremonies underwent extensive training in vocal techniques, astronomical observation, and the interpretation of received communications. The systematic nature of this training and the technical precision required for successful communication argue against dismissing these procedures as purely symbolic religious practices. The distribution of ziggurats across major Mesopotamian cities created a network of structures with coordinated astronomical alignments and compatible acoustic properties. Ziggurats at Uruk, Babylon, Nippur, and other major centers incorporated similar design principles, and functioned according to related operational procedures. This network structure suggests coordinated planning and the possibility of communication between different ziggurat sites, creating an integrated system for maintaining contact with the Apkallu across the entire civilization. Archaeological investigation of ziggurat foundations has revealed underground chambers extending deep beneath the visible structures. These subterranean spaces show careful engineering for environmental control, including ventilation systems, drainage to prevent flooding, and thermal regulation. Some chambers contain evidence of specialized equipment, including crystalline objects, metallic devices, and carved stone instruments whose functions remain unclear. The technical sophistication of these underground installations argues for purposes beyond simple storage or burial. The ziggurat maintenance procedures described in administrative texts indicate these structures required ongoing technical servicing rather than simple cleaning and repair. Specialized craftsmen maintained internal mechanisms, calibrated acoustic chambers, and ensured proper functioning of astronomical alignment features. The texts describe testing procedures performed during specific celestial events to verify that communication capabilities remained operational. This technical maintenance program indicates the ziggurats functioned as sophisticated technological systems, requiring expert attention to remain functional. References throughout Mesopotamian literature to the Tablet of Destinies, described as containing the fundamental decrees governing reality itself, suggest sophisticated information storage and transmission technologies far exceeding simple clay tablets. The Epic of Anzu describes these tablets as shining objects that spoke with voices of thunder when activated, requiring specific knowledge for operation. This description matches more closely with advanced technological devices than conventional writing materials, suggesting the Apkallu left behind information systems that preserved their knowledge in forms that could survive millennia. The Tablet of Destinies appears in multiple mythological narratives as an object of immense power that granted its possessor authority over natural forces and the ability to issue binding decrees affecting both divine and human realms. The Epic of Anzu provides the most detailed account, describing how the demon bird Anzu stole the tablet from Enlil while he was bathing, creating cosmic chaos until the tablets were recovered by Ninurta. The narrative emphasizes that possession of the tablet alone proved insufficient, as Anzu lacked the knowledge required to operate it properly, suggesting the device required specialized training or genetic compatibility for effective use. The physical descriptions of the Tablet of Destinies emphasize characteristics inconsistent with conventional clay tablets. The texts describe the object as shining or gleaming, suggesting reflective or luminescent properties not associated with fired clay. References to the tablet speaking or producing sounds indicate active technological capabilities rather than passive information storage. The requirement for specific activation procedures implies sophisticated operational protocols beyond simple reading of inscribed text. These characteristics collectively suggest the Tablet of Destinies represented advanced information technology rather than conventional writing materials. The authority transfer ceremonies described in Mesopotamian texts involve the physical handling and activation of the Tablet of Destinies by designated individuals who had undergone preparation for this responsibility. The ritual procedures included purification processes, recitation of specific verbal formulas, and performance during precisely calculated astronomical configurations. The technical precision required for these ceremonies indicates they functioned as actual operational procedures for activating technological systems rather than purely symbolic religious performances. The decrees contained in the Tablet of Destinies governed what Mesopotamian texts describe as the me, the fundamental principles regulating all aspects of reality, including natural phenomena, social organization, and technological capabilities. The concept of me encompasses more than simple laws or regulations, suggesting instead a comprehensive operating system or database containing the instructions for maintaining cosmic and social order. The preservation of this information in the Tablet of Destinies indicates a sophisticated information management system designed to ensure critical knowledge remained accessible across vast time periods. The loss or theft of the Tablet of Destinies receives treatment in multiple narratives as catastrophic events threatening the stability of cosmic order. These crisis scenarios describe how the removal of the tablet from its proper location resulted in natural disasters, social chaos, and the disruption of normal physical processes. The immediate and dramatic consequences attributed to the tablet's displacement suggest it functioned as an active control system rather than passive record, with its presence required for maintaining normal operations of natural and social systems. The recovery procedures described in texts addressing theft of the Tablet of Destinies emphasize that simply retrieving the physical object proved insufficient to restore normal operations. The narratives describe complex reactivation procedures involving specific individuals with proper authorization, performance of particular rituals, and restoration of the tablet to designated locations. These operational details indicate the Tablet of Destinies functioned as a sophisticated technological system with security protocols, authorized users, and specific installation requirements. The multiplicity of references to Tablets of Destinies in some texts suggests the existence of multiple devices or copies distributed across different locations. Administrative texts describe Tablets of Destinies associated with specific temples or cities, each governing particular aspects of cosmic order or specific geographical regions. This distributed architecture would have created redundancy, ensuring that critical information and control capabilities would survive even if individual devices were destroyed or lost. Mesopotamian texts consistently describe systematic knowledge preservation efforts undertaken by the Apkallu before their departure, or the coming flood that would destroy Antediluvian civilization. The Eridu Genesis and related texts describe the sealing of knowledge in underground repositories, the training of selected humans in memory techniques for preserving essential information, and the establishment of hereditary priesthoods that would maintain contact with departed Apkallu. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites reveals actual underground chambers equipped with preservation systems capable of protecting stored materials across millennia. The knowledge preservation protocols described in cuneiform texts demonstrate systematic planning for maintaining information across catastrophic disruptions to civilization. The texts describe the creation of multiple redundant copies of essential information, distribution of these copies across different geographical locations, and establishment of institutional structures responsible for their protection and transmission. The sophistication of these preservation strategies indicates deliberate planning by individuals who understood the vulnerability of knowledge to loss during periods of social upheaval. The underground repositories described in text from Nippur, Eridu, and other major temple centers incorporated sophisticated environmental control systems designed to protect stored materials from degradation. Archaeological investigation has revealed actual underground chambers beneath several major Mesopotamian temple sites, constructed with waterproof seals, ventilation systems, and drainage to prevent moisture accumulation. These chambers contained storage facilities designed for preserving both written texts and three-dimensional objects including models, instruments, and material samples. The construction techniques used for these underground repositories demonstrate engineering capabilities that exceeded normal building practices. The chambers were excavated to depths of 40 to 50 cubits, approximately 20 to 25 meters, requiring sophisticated excavation and shoring techniques. The walls received treatment with bitumen and mineral compounds, creating waterproof barriers that have remained effective for millennia. The ceiling construction incorporated corbelling techniques and metallic reinforcement that distributed loads effectively and prevented collapse. The preservation materials described in administrative texts included natural compounds with antimicrobial and antioxidant properties that protected stored materials from biological and chemical degradation. Cedar oil, frankincense resin, and specific mineral salts created environments hostile to microorganisms while preventing oxidation of metallic objects. Chemical analysis of residues found in archaeological excavations confirms the effectiveness of these preservation compounds, with materials stored in treated chambers showing remarkable resistance to decay. The training programs described for hereditary priesthoods responsible for knowledge preservation encompassed not only the content of preserved information, but also the procedures for maintaining storage facilities, interpreting encoded texts, and transmitting knowledge to subsequent generations. These training programs required decades to complete, ensuring that selected individuals achieved mastery of complex knowledge systems before assuming full responsibility for preservation duties. The texts describe examination procedures that verified competency before granting access to the most sensitive repositories. The memory techniques taught to selected individuals enabled preservation of vast amounts of information through oral transmission when written records proved unavailable or insecure. The text described mnemonic systems using spatial visualization, rhythmic patterns, and symbolic associations that allowed trained practitioners to maintain accurate memory of complex technical information, astronomical data, and procedural knowledge. The effectiveness of these memory systems enabled knowledge transmission across generations, even when physical archives were destroyed or inaccessible. The establishment of communication protocols for maintaining contact with departed Apkallu represents one of the most crucial aspects of post-flood knowledge preservation. The text describes specific procedures for conducting communication attempts during optimal astronomical configurations, using specialized equipment installed in temple complexes and ziggurat structures. These protocols included backup procedures for re-establishing contact if primary methods failed, demonstrating systematic contingency planning for maintaining the divine human knowledge transmission network across extended time periods. As direct Apkallu presence diminished following the flood, Mesopotamian sources describe the establishment of human intermediaries who maintained contact through specialized training and ritual procedures. The Babylonian text known as the Bit Messeri describes how certain humans were selected and enhanced through procedures that increased their longevity and cognitive capabilities, enabling them to serve as effective conduits for ongoing Apkallu guidance. Royal burial practices from Ur and other sites reveal preservation techniques and grave goods that suggest genuine expectations of post-mortem communication with these enhanced individuals. The Bit Messeri, preserved in fragmentary form on tablets from the Neo-Babylonian period, provides detailed accounts of selection criteria and enhancement procedures for human intermediaries. The text describes how candidates underwent extensive evaluation, including genealogical analysis to verify descent from previous intermediary lines, physical examination to assess biological suitability, and cognitive testing to measure intellectual capacity and learning potential. The systematic nature of this selection process indicates organized programs designed to identify individuals with optimal characteristics for enhancement and training. The enhancement procedures described in the Bit Messeri involved exposure to substances and treatments that modified human biology to extend lifespan and augment mental capabilities. The text references the administration of specially prepared compounds derived from plant, mineral, and animal sources, combined with exposure to specific frequencies of light and sound during precisely calculated astronomical configurations. The technical precision required for these procedures suggests they preserved actual biological modification techniques rather than symbolic religious rituals. The longevity increases attributed to these enhancement procedures correlate with chronological patterns visible in the Sumerian king list, where rulers who received Apkallu guidance demonstrated lifespans far exceeding normal human parameters. Early dynastic kings, credited with maintaining Apkallu contact, ruled for centuries according to administrative records, while later rulers without such enhancement showed progressively shorter lifespans approaching normal human biology. This pattern suggests the enhancement procedures provided genuine biological modifications that were gradually lost as direct Apkallu contact diminished. The cognitive enhancements described in texts addressing human intermediaries included increased memory capacity, accelerated learning capabilities, and heightened sensory perception, particularly regarding astronomical phenomena. Administrative texts from Uruk describe intermediary priests who could perform complex mathematical calculations mentally, memorize vast quantities of technical information, and perceive celestial events invisible to normal human observation. These capabilities enable the intermediaries to maintain and transmit the sophisticated knowledge systems established by direct Apkallu instruction. The royal burial practices documented at Ur's royal cemetery provide archaeological evidence supporting textual accounts of post-mortem communication expectations. The tombs of rulers and high priests designated as intermediaries incorporated distinctive features including elaborate mummification procedures designed to preserve neural tissue, positioning of crystalline objects near the head that might facilitate energy transmission, and inclusion of communication devices that could theoretically enable contact between living descendants and deceased ancestors. The technical sophistication of these burial preparations argues for genuine expectations of ongoing communication rather than purely symbolic religious practices. Queen Puabi's tomb, excavated by Leonard Woolley between 1922 and 1934, exemplifies the special burial treatment accorded to designated intermediaries. The tomb contained preservation techniques exceeding normal royal burial practices, including chemical treatments that maintained tissue integrity and positioning of the body according to precise astronomical alignments. The grave goods included objects described in texts as communication facilitators, including lapis lazuli inlaid with gold that might have functioned as focusing elements for energy transmission, and elaborate headdresses incorporating metallic components arranged in geometric patterns. The training programs established for human intermediaries created hereditary priesthoods that maintained specialized knowledge across generations. Administrative texts describe multi-decade training curricula covering astronomical observation, mathematical calculation, ritual procedures, and communication protocols. Students learned not only the technical content of preserved knowledge, but also the procedures for transmitting this information to subsequent generations. The institutional structures supporting these training programs ensured continuity, even when individual intermediaries died before completing their designated service periods. The communication protocols developed for human intermediaries employed the acoustic and astronomical capabilities of ziggurat complexes combined with specific mental preparation techniques. Texts describe how intermediaries underwent fasting, meditation, and exposure to particular frequencies of sound and light that altered their consciousness and enhanced receptivity to communications from departed Apkallu. The technical precision required for these procedures indicates they functioned as actual communication protocols rather than symbolic religious performances. The transition from direct Apkallu instruction to mediated communication through human intermediaries created challenges that Mesopotamian texts address explicitly. The texts acknowledge that human intermediaries lacked the comprehensive knowledge and enhanced capabilities of the Apkallu themselves, creating potential for information loss or distortion during transmission. The institutional responses to these challenges included creation of redundant knowledge preservation systems, establishment of verification procedures to check transmitted information against archived records, and maintenance of multiple independent intermediary lines to ensure information accuracy through cross-validation. The transformation of direct Apkallu instruction into mystery school traditions enabled the preservation and gradual transmission of advanced knowledge across millennia. Babylonian temple schools, Egyptian priesthoods, and later Hellenistic mystery cults all demonstrate organizational structures and initiation procedures designed to protect sensitive knowledge while ensuring its survival through political upheavals and cultural transformations. The consistency of astronomical, mathematical, and architectural knowledge across these different traditions argues for continuous transmission from common Mesopotamian sources rather than independent rediscovery. The Babylonian temple schools that emerged during the Old Babylonian period formalized the knowledge preservation and transmission systems originally established by the Apkallu. These institutions incorporated hierarchical structures with novices, initiates, and masters, progressing through increasingly advanced levels of instruction. The curriculum covered astronomy, mathematics, medicine, architecture, and ritual procedures, preserving the full range of knowledge domains originally taught by the seven Apkallu. Administrative texts from these schools describe standardized testing procedures, graduation requirements, and certification processes that ensured consistent educational standards across different institutions. The initiation procedures employed by mystery schools incorporated physical, mental, and symbolic components, designed to prepare candidates for receiving advanced knowledge. The procedures included purification rituals that might have served practical purposes, including dietary restrictions that enhanced cognitive function, exposure to specific environmental conditions that altered consciousness, and symbolic deaths and rebirths that psychologically prepared initiates for fundamental changes in worldview. The multi-stage nature of these initiations created progressive revelation of knowledge, with each level providing information that built upon previous stages. The astronomical knowledge preserved through mystery school traditions demonstrated remarkable consistency across different cultures and time periods. The Babylonian astronomical compendium known as Mul-Apin, compiled around 1000 BC but clearly based on much earlier sources, contains star catalogues and planetary tables that match information found in Egyptian astronomical texts and later Greek sources. This consistency indicates continuous transmission from common Mesopotamian origins rather than independent development in each culture. The mathematical knowledge transmitted through mystery schools included geometric principles, numerical systems, and calculation methods that appeared in Babylonian, Egyptian, Greek, and Indian mathematical traditions. The base 60 numerical system developed in Mesopotamia influenced mathematical development throughout the ancient world, while specific calculation techniques for astronomical phenomena appeared in nearly identical form across different cultures. The widespread distribution of these mathematical methods argues for organized transmission through institutional networks rather than casual cultural diffusion. The architectural knowledge preserved in mystery school traditions enabled the construction of sophisticated structures incorporating astronomical alignments and geometric proportions across multiple civilizations. The proportional relationships found in Mesopotamian ziggurats appear in Egyptian pyramids, Greek temples, and Roman public buildings. The consistency of these architectural principles across different cultures and building types indicates transmission of standardized design knowledge through organized educational systems. The mystery school traditions developed sophisticated methods for encoding sensitive knowledge within apparently innocuous texts and symbols. Technical information was embedded within religious narratives, mathematical constants were encoded in architectural proportions, and astronomical data was preserved in ritual calendars. These encoding techniques protected knowledge from unauthorized access, while ensuring its preservation through periods when direct transmission became impossible due to political persecution or social upheaval. The organizational structures of mystery schools incorporated security protocols designed to protect sensitive knowledge from misuse, while ensuring its availability to properly prepared individuals. The hierarchical initiation systems created multiple barriers to knowledge access, requiring candidates to demonstrate both intellectual capability and moral character before receiving advanced instruction. The oath-bound nature of mystery school membership created social and psychological barriers against unauthorized disclosure. The survival of mystery school traditions through major political and cultural transitions demonstrates the robustness of their institutional designs. The Babylonian temple school survived the Assyrian conquest, the Persian occupation, and the Hellenistic period, maintaining continuous operation for over 1500 years. Egyptian priesthoods preserved their knowledge systems through multiple foreign invasions and dynastic changes. These institutional survival patterns indicate deliberate design for long-term persistence rather than ad hoc organizational development. The influence of Mesopotamian mystery schools extended into the Hellenistic period through direct contact between Greek scholars and Babylonian priests. Historical records document Greek students including Pythagoras and Democritus traveling to Babylon to study with Chaldean masters. The astronomical and mathematical knowledge these Greek scholars brought back to the Mediterranean world retained clear marks of Babylonian origin, including terminology, calculation methods, and theoretical frameworks derived directly from Mesopotamian sources. The survival of Mesopotamian astronomical and mathematical traditions through Islamic scholarly families in Baghdad and other centers demonstrates the effectiveness of knowledge preservation systems established during the Apkallu period. Medieval Islamic texts reference consultation with families, claiming descent from pre-Islamic Mesopotamian priestly lineages who possessed astronomical instruments, mathematical calculation methods, and technical knowledge that exceeded contemporary Islamic achievements. The sophistication of their contributions to Islamic science suggests successful maintenance of Apkallu-derived knowledge systems across 3 millennia. The establishment of Baghdad as the Abbasid capital in 762 AD placed the new Islamic center directly atop ancient Mesopotamian civilizational heartland. The city's construction on the Tigris River near ancient Babylon enabled access to surviving communities that maintained pre-Islamic knowledge traditions. Historical accounts describe how the early Abbasid caliphs actively sought out scholars from these ancient families to contribute to the House of Wisdom and other intellectual institutions. The astronomical instruments and calculation methods contributed by these Mesopotamian scholarly families demonstrated sophistication exceeding contemporary Islamic capabilities. The astrolabe designs, planetary tables, and eclipse prediction methods they provided incorporated mathematical techniques and observational data that could only have been accumulated through centuries of continuous work. The sudden availability of these advanced capabilities to Islamic astronomers suggests transmission of preserved knowledge systems rather than contemporary invention. The mathematical contributions of Mesopotamian scholarly families to Islamic science included the base 60 numerical system for angular and temporal measurements, sophisticated calculation methods for astronomical phenomena, and geometric techniques for architectural design. These mathematical tools appeared in Islamic scientific texts, with explicit attribution to ancient Mesopotamian sources, acknowledging their derivation from pre-Islamic knowledge systems. The precision and sophistication of these methods far exceeded what newly converted populations could plausibly have developed independently. The medical knowledge preserved by Mesopotamian scholarly families included pharmacological recipes, surgical techniques, and diagnostic procedures that paralleled information found in ancient cuneiform medical texts. Islamic medical compendia incorporate treatments and procedures explicitly attributed to ancient Mesopotamian sources, with some texts preserving the original Akkadian terminology for specific diseases, treatments, or anatomical structures. This linguistic continuity demonstrates direct transmission from ancient medical traditions rather than independent rediscovery. The architectural knowledge contributed by Mesopotamian families influenced Islamic building design through transmission of geometric principles, proportional systems, and astronomical alignment techniques. The sophisticated mathematics governing Islamic architectural decoration, including complex geometric patterns and three-dimensional muqarnas vaulting, shows clear derivation from Mesopotamian mathematical traditions. The astronomical alignments of major mosques and the geometric relationships governing their proportions reflect architectural principles traceable to ancient Mesopotamian temple design. The institutional structures through which these Mesopotamian families preserved and transmitted knowledge demonstrated sophisticated organizational principles. The families maintained private libraries containing texts in multiple languages, including Akkadian, Aramaic, and Arabic. They operated educational systems that trained selected students in ancient knowledge while maintaining security against unauthorized disclosure. The multi-generational nature of these family traditions ensured continuity of knowledge transmission across political upheavals and social transformations. The verification procedures employed by Islamic scholars to validate knowledge received from Mesopotamian families included comparison with ancient texts, experimental testing of technical claims, and consultation with multiple independent sources. The rigorous nature of this verification process and the successful validation of Mesopotamian-derived knowledge argues for its genuine authenticity rather than contemporary fabrication. The consistency between information provided by scholarly families and data from excavated cuneiform tablets demonstrates the accuracy of oral and written transmission across millennia. The gradual decline of these Mesopotamian scholarly families during the later medieval period coincided with destruction of libraries, persecution during various invasions, and social changes that disrupted traditional knowledge transmission systems. However, the knowledge they had contributed to Islamic science survived through its incorporation into standard scientific texts and educational curricula. This integration ensured that Apkallu-derived knowledge continued to influence human civilization even after the destruction of the original preservation communities. Recent archaeological discoveries continue to validate aspects of the Apkallu traditions that were previously dismissed as mythology. Underwater excavations off the coast of India and Japan have revealed submerged structures, demonstrating construction techniques that match Mesopotamian architectural principles. Metallurgical analysis of ancient artifacts reveals alloy compositions and manufacturing processes that require knowledge of chemistry and metallurgy, attributed to Apkallu instruction. Genetic studies of ancient populations show markers suggesting selective breeding programs designed to preserve specific capabilities across generations. The underwater ruins discovered off the coast of Gujarat, India, near the modern city of Dwarka, demonstrate architectural features that parallel Mesopotamian construction techniques. Marine archaeological surveys conducted between 2000 and 2002 have revealed massive stone structures at depths of up to 40 meters below current sea level. The structures incorporate precise stone cutting, geometric layouts, and proportional systems matching those found in Mesopotamian temple architecture. The submersion depth indicates construction during periods of lower sea level, placing their origin in the late Pleistocene or early Holocene, contemporary with the Apkallu instruction period described in Mesopotamian texts. The Yonaguni monument off the coast of Japan presents similar evidence of advanced prehistoric construction capabilities. The submerged structure, discovered in 1986 by diving instructor Kihachiro Aratake, displays carved stone surfaces, right-angle corners, and geometric proportions that appear deliberately created rather than naturally formed. Geological analysis indicates the structure was above sea level approximately 10,000 years ago. dating its construction to the same general period when Mesopotamian tradition places active Apkallu instruction. The architectural principles visible in the Yonaguni structure match those attributed to Apkallu teaching, including precise astronomical alignments and geometric proportional systems. The metallurgical analysis of Bronze Age artifacts from multiple sites has revealed alloy compositions and manufacturing techniques that exceed documented ancient capabilities. Copper-tin bronzes from early Mesopotamian sites consistently achieve optimal ratios of approximately 10% tin to 90% copper, the ideal composition for tools and weapons. The consistency of these ratios across hundreds of artifacts indicates systematic application of metallurgical knowledge rather than variable experimental results. Chemical analysis reveals trace element signatures showing deliberate ore selection based on understanding of how impurities affect final alloy properties. The iron artifacts discovered in contexts predating the official Iron Age demonstrate advanced metallurgical capabilities that conventional chronologies struggle to explain. Iron beads from Egyptian tombs dating to 3000 BC show evidence of sophisticated smelting techniques and carbon content indicating deliberate steel production. The Ulfbert swords from Viking period Scandinavia incorporate crucible steel with carbon content and purity levels not officially achieved until the Industrial Revolution. These metallurgical achievements suggest preservation of advanced techniques transmitted from much earlier periods. The genetic analysis of ancient human remains has revealed population patterns consistent with selective breeding programs described in texts addressing human enhancement. DNA extracted from royal burials at Ur and other elite cemeteries shows genetic markers indicating restricted breeding populations, with specific characteristics including enhanced longevity factors, increased cranial capacity, and distinctive physiological traits. The geographic distribution of these genetic markers traces pathways of cultural influence from Mesopotamia to Egypt, the Indus Valley, and other early civilizations. The analysis of mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome markers in modern populations reveals genetic lineages traceable to ancient Mesopotamian populations. Certain Middle Eastern, European, and Asian populations carry genetic signatures indicating descent from distinct breeding populations that existed during the Bronze Age. The geographic distribution of these genetic markers correlates with locations of major ancient civilizations and mystery school centers, suggesting genetic continuity within knowledge-preserving communities across millennia. The discovery of sophisticated astronomical instruments in archaeological contexts validates textual descriptions of advanced observational capabilities. The Antikythera mechanism, recovered from a Roman shipwreck dating to approximately 100 BC, demonstrates computational capabilities for astronomical calculation that were not officially rediscovered until the Renaissance. The device incorporates gear trains, differential mechanisms, and mathematical relationships that match descriptions in Mesopotamian astronomical texts, suggesting derivation from knowledge systems traceable to Apkallu instruction. The analysis of ancient construction sites using modern surveying equipment reveals precision that challenges conventional understanding of ancient capabilities. Laser scanning of megalithic structures, including those at Baalbek in Lebanon, Sacsayhuaman in Peru, and the Giza Plateau in Egypt, demonstrates tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters across multi-ton stone blocks. The engineering knowledge required for achieving this precision matches capabilities attributed to Apkallu instruction in architectural texts. Mesopotamian prophetic texts describe cyclical patterns of Apkallu withdrawal and return based on astronomical calculations and human developmental stages. These prophecies specify conditions that would trigger return interventions, including environmental catastrophes, technological crises, and social breakdowns that exceed human management capabilities. The mathematical precision of these cyclical predictions and their correlation with actual historical crisis periods suggest they preserve genuine operational protocols for ongoing monitoring and periodic intervention rather than religious speculation. The prophetic texts from the Neo-Babylonian and Seleucid periods preserve detailed calculations of cyclical time periods when Apkallu return becomes possible or necessary. The most common cycle mentioned spans 3,600 years, corresponding to what modern astronomy recognizes as potential orbital periods for hypothetical outer solar system objects. The texts describe these cycles as periods when the sky roads open, enabling travel between Earth and the distant realms from which the Apkallu originated. The astronomical precision of these calculations indicates they were based on actual celestial mechanics, rather than arbitrary religious symbolism. The crisis conditions specified as return triggers in prophetic texts include specific thresholds for environmental degradation, technological development, and social organization. The environmental criteria describe conditions including temperature changes exceeding specific ranges, precipitation pattern disruptions affecting agricultural productivity, and atmospheric composition alterations that threaten human health. The precision of these environmental specifications suggests sophisticated understanding of planetary climate systems and their vulnerability to disruption. The technological crisis scenarios described in prophetic texts focus on developments that could threaten human survival or fundamentally alter human nature. The texts describe dangers from technologies that manipulate fundamental forces of nature, create artificial life forms, or enable mass destruction beyond human control. These scenarios match contemporary concerns about nuclear weapons, genetic engineering, and artificial intelligence, suggesting the prophetic texts preserve genuine understanding of technological development trajectories and their associated risks. The social breakdown criteria specified in prophetic texts include measurable indicators of governmental failure, economic collapse, and moral decay that would threaten civilization's continuation. The text describes specific population decline thresholds, resource depletion levels, and conflict intensity that would trigger return interventions. The systematic nature of these criteria indicates they functioned as actual monitoring parameters rather than vague religious warnings. The mathematical relationships between different prophetic cycles create a hierarchical system of time measurement, tracking multiple astronomical and terrestrial phenomena. The 3,600-year major cycle subdivides into smaller periods of 600 years, which further divide into 120-year generations. This hierarchical structure enables correlation between long-term astronomical cycles and shorter-term human developmental stages, creating a comprehensive framework for monitoring civilization's progress toward return conditions. The correlation between predicted return windows and actual historical crisis periods provides evidence for the prophetic text's validity. Major civilizational transitions, environmental catastrophes, and social upheavals have occurred with statistical regularity during predicted return windows. The Younger Dryas climate event, the Bronze Age collapse, and other major historical disruptions correspond closely with calculated return periods, suggesting the cyclical framework preserved genuine predictive capabilities. The ongoing monitoring activities described in prophetic texts involved both astronomical observations and terrestrial condition assessments. The texts describe how designated human observers maintained systematic records of celestial phenomena, environmental conditions, and social developments. These observations were compared against threshold criteria to determine whether return intervention had become necessary. The institutional structures supporting these monitoring activities persisted for centuries, demonstrating long-term commitment to maintaining readiness for return events. The communication protocols established for initiating return contact during predicted windows involved activation of ancient communication facilities, including ziggurat complexes and underground chambers. The text describes specific procedures for powering up dormant equipment, conducting signal transmission attempts during optimal astronomical configurations, and interpreting responses indicating successful contact establishment. The technical precision of these protocols indicates they preserved actual operational procedures rather than symbolic religious rituals. The verification procedures described for confirming genuine Apkallu return versus imposter claims incorporated multiple authentication mechanisms. The texts specify that returning Apkallu would demonstrate specific knowledge, possess particular technological capabilities, and provide verification codes that could be checked against archived records. These security protocols protected against deception, while ensuring legitimate return communications would be recognized and accepted. The accumulated evidence presented throughout this investigation points toward a profound historical reality that challenges conventional understanding of human civilizational development. The Apkallu traditions preserved in Mesopotamian cuneiform tablets represent far more than mythological constructs or religious allegory. The consistency of these accounts across multiple independent sources spanning 2 millennia, their correlation with archaeological evidence from sites across the ancient world, and their preservation of technical knowledge that exceeds documented ancient capabilities all argue for their basis in actual historical events rather than imaginative fiction. The 7 beings named in administrative texts from Nippur, Uruk, and other major Mesopotamian centers introduce systematic knowledge in domains including agriculture, metallurgy, architecture, astronomy, medicine, writing, and social organization. The technical precision preserved in descriptions of their instruction, the sophisticated capabilities attributed to their teaching, and the sudden appearance of advanced civilizational features in the archaeological record all support traditions describing external intervention rather than gradual indigenous development. The amphibious characteristics emphasized in both linguistic terminology and physical descriptions suggest these instructors possessed capabilities fundamentally different from ordinary human biology. The catastrophic flood that Mesopotamian sources consistently describe as ending the period of direct Apkallu instruction corresponds with geological evidence for dramatic climate change and sea level rise during the Younger Dryas termination. The knowledge preservation efforts undertaken before this catastrophe, including the sealing of underground repositories and the training of human intermediaries, enabled crucial information to survive civilizational collapse and guide subsequent reconstruction. The mystery school traditions that emerged from these preservation systems successfully transmitted Apkallu-derived knowledge across millennia through Babylonian temple schools, Egyptian priesthoods, Hellenistic mystery cults, and Islamic scholarly families. Recent archaeological discoveries continue to validate aspects of these ancient traditions that conventional scholarship has dismissed as impossible. Underwater structures off the coasts of India and Japan demonstrate construction techniques matching Mesopotamian architectural principles. Metallurgical analysis reveals Bronze Age alloys achieved through knowledge of chemistry and materials science attributed to Apkallu instruction. Genetic evidence suggests selective breeding programs designed to preserve enhanced capabilities within specific human lineages. Astronomical instruments recovered from ancient shipwrecks demonstrate computational sophistication traceable to Mesopotamian mathematical frameworks. The cyclical return prophecies preserved in Mesopotamian texts provide mathematical frameworks for anticipating periods when Apkallu intervention might resume. The correlation between these predicted cycles and actual historical crisis periods suggests the prophecies preserve genuine operational protocols for ongoing monitoring rather than religious speculation. The environmental, technological, and social thresholds specified as return triggers match contemporary global challenges with disturbing precision. As humanity confronts existential threats including climate disruption, technological risks from artificial intelligence and genetic engineering, and social breakdown from economic inequality and political polarization, the ancient accounts of beings who established civilization and promised eventual return take on new urgency. The knowledge preservation systems they established, the human bloodlines they enhanced, and the communication protocols they left behind may represent not merely historical curiosities, but practical resources for navigating our current planetary crisis. Understanding this legacy and preparing for potential renewed contact may prove crucial for human survival and continued evolutionary development. The question is no longer whether the Apkallu existed, but whether humanity has developed sufficient wisdom to benefit from their return